Hello everybody, and welcome to the LJL podcast, episode 19. Welcome. It's been a little while, but it's only been a few days since our last podcast and our last stream of the LJL coverage. I am one of your co-hosts, actually. It's like this. I'm not your default host. I'm one of your co-hosts, Alex, otherwise known as Lexi, go by MaskedSwan on the internet. I am joined by the vivacious Alex, otherwise known as Nymaera, Hapgood brother, and the extravagant Samuel, otherwise known as Initia1ise, Hapgood, the Hapgood brother duo that are my casters and hosts and co-hosts. Gentlemen, as I say always, introduce yourselves.
Okay, I guess I'll go first then, because Sam was slow off the mark there. Of course, as always, as always, I'm Alex, Sam Nymaera. I'm one of the two Alexes here. Stretching my muscles a bit in the co-host role this week. Did some cool things, and we've had some content, we've had some games back at the grindstone. Been doing a lot of casting. It's been good.
And I've been indexing down hard on the play-by-play role. I've been doing all them games with these lovely lads here, so it's been good fun.
Has been good fun. That's right. We've finally covered a week of the LJL. It's been a little minute. It's been a hot minute since we've actually had some LJL content, but we've done it. And it feels good to be back home, lads. It feels good to be back home. Not sure about you both, but it's right. We have content, as Nymaera said. Gonna do my standard little skit that I always love to do. Initialize. Initialize. Yes. What, though, is this podcast? I said LJL podcast, but what does that mean? What does it mean?
Well, a long time ago in the distant past, there was this league called the LJL.
Right.
But they only ever made content in Japanese, and that made that all these fans from all over the world who didn't speak Japanese, there's quite a few of them, didn't have any content. And so we decided we would step into that breach, be heroes, really, and make content, make a podcast, no less, in English for those fans.
That's kind of amazing, and we've kept to it. Consistency was our key to doing this. There had been stuff before, but we have kept to that grindstone that Initialize set for us. And we're grinding. Not like the magic card, though, grindstone. Nah. Not like you. If LS is listening to us, not like that card. Unless we're playing Painter's Servant, then we're playing grindstone, because we're going to grind and win the game. But that's beside the point. Nymaera. If we're doing this so consistently, then we must have some affiliation with Riot or something like that, right?
I'd like to liken us to that one heavenly warrior who did go and cultivate on top of the mountaintop completely on their own, because there was no mentor overseeing us. It was entirely off of our own understanding, our own finesse, and our own ability to do this with no affiliation to Riot Japan, or any of its partners. We are in this for ourselves.
Independency. We were like Braveheart to a degree. They will not take our freedom. But with that all said, obviously, all of this podcast is our own views and opinions, does not represent the LJL Unofficial Cast either. This is us just spitballing, having some fun, and just taking a bit of a chill pill to give a recap on everything, because we know there's a lot of League of Legends podcasts, and we know there's a lot of content out there, so this is a place where you can kind of get everything in a nice little ball with a bit of our opinions as well out there. As always, we do have a Discord server where we are active, and we've appreciated the people joining on a consistent basis now. We really invite everybody to come in, say hello. We try and keep active on there and engage in conversation with people, as well as also we do have our own social medias. If you are watching us on YouTube, you'll see at Nymaera, at Initialize, and at MaskedSwan are our individual social media handles. And if you want to follow the LJL Officially Unofficial, that is LJL_officially_unofficial on Instagram and Twitch.
No, Twitter is different, yeah.
And our Twitter is different because that's LJL Unofficial.
Character limits, damn it.
Yes, character limits are annoying, or maybe we should have just gone with LJL Unofficial. Who knows? Who knows? We did that well over 12 podcast episode ago, so that's for past us to be annoyed at. Obviously, though, if you want to catch this podcast, not just on YouTube, we are on all major streaming platforms: iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, blah, blah, blah. If you listen to it, it's probably on there. And if you are on iTunes, give us a little rating. or a review. We don't mind what you say, but we'd appreciate some feedback and a thumbs up, as it would be.
Heck yeah.
And with that all said, gentlemen, I think it's about time that we just get into the thick of things, because this could be a rather long podcast, and we don't want it to go on for super, super, super long. So, it's time for a weekly roundup. Oh, it feels good to be back, gentlemen. It's been a while since we've actually had a roundup to do that was
do anything about it,
weekly. And let's be honest, we never actually got to do a proper weekly roundup, because sometimes we would have to do a double weekly roundup in 1 week. But now our schedule is back to normal, as we said in our previous podcast episode. It's all back. We're good. We're Gucci. And I want to hand it over. Let's do a 3-3-2. Initia1ise, would you be so kind as to do the first 3 games for our weekly roundup and what happened?
Of course I can. So the first game was, of course, Crest Gaming Act versus Axis. Interesting one to come back in on. Worth pointing out as well. Axis had a slight problem in, of course, their bot laner Hyde, and I believe their coach as well?
Coach Yang.
And Coach Yang were stuck back in Korea due to travel restrictions with the COVID situation. So it meant they basically had to role swap Uinyan from the top lane down to AD carry and bring in this kind of rookie of sorts. He played a little bit before on... Was it Unsold Staff? No, who was he playing with now?
No, he played for an amateur team in a Japanese Akiba tournament, if I remember rightly.
And I believe he was on a team with one of the other rookies debuting as well. So there was a couple of rookies.
Oh no, that was an LJL Scouting Grounds player.
Sure.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Natsume was known as Gil previously, but yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Otherwise, it was Natsume who was stepping into the top lane role, and that put Axis into a bit of a weird space. So as a kind of rundown of the rosters, CJ managed to get themselves a hold of the new Wukong for Nap. They've got this new jungler as well, Unica, who's stepping in place of Yoshi for now, who was on set jungle. Arya picked up Syndra for the first time in his career ever. And then the bot lane was Draven and Nautilus for Gango and Grendel. It was a spicy lineup for them. Other side, it was Renekton, Kindred, which we've been seeing a bit more of. It was the LeBlanc. It was the Misfortune for Uinyan, and the Thresh for Corporal. It was an interesting one. It was actually fairly even for gold-wise for quite a lot of the game, but the problem was effectively that it hit a point where Nap on this Wukong would just get onto Hoglet, get onto Uinyan a little bit as well, and ruin people's lives. The CGA would go in. There was 1 or 2 interesting flashes. Gango flashed in the face for Renekton chasing for kills. There's still a bit of the CGA-ness in there, but the damage out of the Syndra and the Draven particularly were very impressive. The engages for Nap on the Wukong were very good and did get CGA the win, even if it was a little sloppy at points. Hoglet pulled out the Kindred, looked a bit rough. 0, 7, and 7. Not the best thing ever. I mean, there's a lot of issues in there. Farmed pretty well, got a lot of marks, but was just getting nailed every time. The ult was basically coming up, and all it was a delay before Wukong just pressed ult again and blew the poor Kindred up.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the game itself just was very flippant. It felt like Axis weren't ever fully out of it until slightly later in the game. Right, Nymaera?
Yeah, so effectively this whole game boiled down to just the first death that Gadiadu had on LeBlanc. He had a Magi Skull Stealer. He was picking people off across the map. Giving any LJL mid lane a LeBlanc is dangerous. Arya managed to deal with it well, though, as we expect from him. He had some good one-shots in a lot of team fights to Syndra, although he wasn't necessarily the solo carry on the team. I think that Nap was the guy who was the MVP for that game. For me, the Wukong was huge. However, there was one pick onto Gadiadu. He died. It snowballed into a big team fight, into a Baron, and that kind of ended up just tilting the game away from what was pretty even.
Yeah, it was definitely a game that was flippant and all over the place. Go on, Initia1ise. What's your thought? What's this thought you got?
So the last thing I wanted to point out is obviously the one person I was kind of quietly impressed with, considering the circumstances, is like Uinyan actually was pretty okay on the Misfortune. There was an early flash that was burned versus Gango, who was playing super aggressive. That wasn't fantastic, but stayed pretty even in CS, had some good bullet times, 2, 3, and 7, decent damage numbers. Like, that's not bad for a role swapped AD carry.
Survived lane versus Gango and Grendel too, especially on their main picks.
Yeah. You have to assume that Uinyan's backup role or secondary role when he plays solo queue was AD carry for them to be...
He played like it. He did play like it. He wasn't bad.
Yeah, he was comfortable. Nymaera! Sir, would you be willing to do a quick recap for me of the next game that we had in the day?
Sure, but keep this short and sweet. It was V3 versus Axis, so Axis kind of had their second game here. We saw a return of the Nidalee from Boogie. It was Nidalee versus Graves in the matchup, but Boogie got off to a fantastic start, had a level 1 buff take, forcing a flash out of Hoglet as well, I believe. Ran over the jungle matchup. Yeah, ran over the jungle matchup, and then mid lane, which was Galio versus Corki, normally goes in the favor of Corki. Doesn't really help when the jungle pressure is that damn high, though. It was a pretty dominant game from V3. They were never really in question of winning it. They had all of the objectives. I think they lost 1 Herald and 1 Tower, and that's it. Archer returned to form. Archer and Reyna had a really good game on Aphelios Thresh. However, and again, Eunyan didn't have an awful game on Misfortune again. Corporal picked up his Nautilus. It just, that level 1 offset the game so heavily. Boogie ran over the entire damn map. It's great to see him back.
Yeah, I mean, I also want to point out, speaking of that Corki, defensive package every time.
Yeah, but I mean, this was a 26-minute game that looked over almost from the 3-minute mark, really, with the red steal that happened. And to be honest, definitely good to watch the early part and watch Boogie for any aspiring junglers out there. I would say that more. The rest of the team played well, but watch Boogie if you're an aspiring jungler, because his Nidalee was very active across the map.
Well, he backed himself to win a level 1 smite fight. He did it. He won the game off it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
GG, go next. What's the next game, guys?
Yeah, GG, well played. I'm going to do the quick recap now.
A good one as well.
Well, is it a good one? Is it a bad one?
Fun.
It was a fun one, and this was me actually doing my premiere casting, really, for this split so far, and we'll talk about that later. But this was Burning Core facing off against CGA. Both teams drafted pretty reasonably, honestly speaking. Wasn't any huge out-drafting potential. However, mid lane and Arya played another first time in their professional career. They had already done it on that Syndra, as Initial1ise had mentioned earlier. Now they're doing it on the Kassadin, and, well, the game wasn't clean. It was one of the most bloodiest games ever. We had 16 for Burning Core and 18 for CGA. It was a close game. It was a 33-minute game with over a kill a minute. It was bloody. Arya ended the game on 12, 2, and 1. Gango on 3, 0, and 12. Definitely getting some kill steals from Arya there. If I was Gango, I would not be impressed. I would be like, you stole my, you hurt my KDA. But Unica came in on their first game and played reasonably well in that jungle. There's definitely some question marks which we'll get into later, as well as Yu-Gi-Oh played half decently versus Arya in the mid lane on a Lulu. So I mean,
this was Unica's second game, by the way. They played the first game of the game a day against Axis. Yeah, because CJ played against
Unica. Sorry, I was talking about Yu-Gi-Oh.
Sorry, yes, Yu-Gi-Oh's first game, Unica's second.
Yeah, but we're gonna get, as I said, we're talking about them later. And yeah, it was a good game. It was just a good, fun game to watch. It's not a high level game because it's just fighting every 3 seconds, and they're fighting over absolutely nothing. And sometimes me and Initial1ise, I just flab. Well, I'm not flabbergasted. I get to be silent because Initial1ise loses his voice. So I mean,
so it's also worth noting that Ray Farkey picked up the Wukong for the first time. Again, that's a pick which we've seen from so many different people. Once his first Echo game of his career too. So lots of new stuff to kind of have a look at, and yeah, ridiculous amounts of kills this game.
And like, credit to Once in particular for me, even though Burning Core lost. He had a very good early game, was taking all of Unica's camps, just pathing really intelligently to punish the newer jungler. That was great to see. But the end game, oh my days, that Baron call come ending around the Nexus was...
worthy of that game. Worthy of that game.
So, like, a couple of members of CGA had died. There was one Nexus turret remaining for Burning Core. What remains of CGA were trying to end the game. And basically, Yuhi and Proud on Aphelios and Yuumi snuck into the Baron pit to, like, 2-man it. Took so long that Unica respawned, came in, stole the Baron, and but CGA ended. It was, like, this back and forth about where were people ending up, where were they not. Gango flashing over the wall to, like, pretend that CGA had backed but hadn't. Like, it was I don't know, man.
Well, for a lot of that game, we weren't saying much, and I mean, Nymaera began hosting duties for this game for us. We have one of us always trying to type so we can see notes or maybe things that we miss in the background. Nymaera halfway through the game just stopped typing and then basically came to us and was like, lads, I don't really know what else I can say here.
I'm just sat there like, I mean, guys, they're just. There's a point where it's like, why are they fighting? What's happening here? And then it's like silent for a couple of minutes. I'm like, sorry guys, I really couldn't think of anything.
Initialize, sir. If you may, can you take me through the fourth game of day one of the LJL summer split, not spring summer split, summer split?
Do it, Sam.
It was the last of our sort of bracket one of the 4 teams playing. It was Burning Core versus V3. And this one was kind of decided super early off teleport plays in the bot lane where everybody turned up, nobody died, but Burning Core lost practically all of their summoners, where V3 lost like about 2. I think it was an exhaust from Ryan and possibly a cleanse from Arch, and that was it. And in the mid lane, Boogie turned up with Ace, and they killed UJO under his turret.
They did.
They burned none. So effectively, it was like a 5 versus 3 in the bot lane. And Burning Core got nothing for it, just lost all their summoners. UJO died in mid lane in a 2 versus 1, where Boogie and Ace didn't lose any summoners. And at that point, with the summoners being down, it was just a really big snowball from V3. Once went towards a Kindred, was looking to try and carry once again. Good farm numbers, but because of the way the summoners were, the lanes went, he was just getting found in the jungle. Rayfarky was on Maokai, was getting caught out quite a lot. Yeah, pretty clean snowball from V3 after just the summoner spells being absolutely completely used in that bot lane play and around the mid lane.
Well, I think talking about that bot lane, you raised a very good point on the cast, and then Nymaera really hammered it home in the post game, and talking about Yuhi on this Ezreal pick, and in the pick and ban phase, you were like, this is worrying because V3 decided to pick Aphelios away, and then it put them in a very awkward thing. And then go check out our post-game part of that, because Nymaera really brings up some good points about how this draft went, this composition, and I bring up the point that I believe the set that was first picked for Burning Core was a mistake, because they later had to switch it round to Proud. And if you want to see a pick and ban phase go horribly wrong for a team, go watch that one, because that's a team halfway through going panic, 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 and when you're against V3, it's not going to be a straightforward pick and ban phase. They're going to be smart.
The thing is, like, for another team, that draft might have been fine, but particularly for Burning Core, that's not great. So Set as a top lane has kind of fallen off a bit now. He doesn't lose any lanes, sure, but there are some other top lanes which just have a larger impact than him, which he's kind of not used to, particularly when Wukong's now in the meta. We've seen that in LPL. It's just been really crazy. So having Set as a flex pick is really important, but Yuhi's best champion by an absolute landslide is the Aphelios. They could have first pick it. They didn't. It gets first rounded by V3 after the set's been locked in, and then Yuhi looked toothless.
I mean, that's pretty much Nymaera clarifying my point from Cast is that I have questions about what does Yuhi do when he's not on Aphelios or Misfortune. The only champions he won on were Aphelios and Misfortune. He got 4 wins on the Aphelios and 1 on the Misfortunes. Even the Misfortune's kind of a bit of a question mark for me. And at that point, it's like, well, if your ADC is literally limited to 1 champion, you are in trouble. And especially when ADCs are so important at the minute, like just in terms of survival, Death Stance meta coming in, like that's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think these points that we've brought up are actually going to be a really good place for our listeners to think about when we talk about the next 4 rounds of games and these teams, where we're going in to talk about things like Death Stance, to talk about certain picks in regarding that set being potentially something that players aren't going to play as often, and if they do pick it, it's in specific spots, or maybe they're getting counterpicked, and it's gonna, listener, I implore you, think about this in a bit later. Nymaera, can you take us over for our 5th game of the day? And oh Oh, no,
So this was Sengoku coming off of a second place finish in spring to Detonation Focus Me. They lost 3-1 in the finals after beating DFM 3-2 in the Juggernaut match, which got them through to the finals.
Yep.
They're facing off against Rascal Jester. Rascal Jester finished 4th in the regular split, I believe.
Very respectable, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, respectful, of course. They bombed out in round 1, unfortunately, to Crest Gaming Act. It was a fantastic series, 3-2 to CGA. Lots of big plays. One of maybe my favorite playoff series, actually. It was really fun to watch.
No, it was.
Just in terms of the spectacle. Sengoku came back and they just hammered the Jesters. They just absolutely crapped on them. They curb stomped them. This is a Jester lineup with substitute mid, substitute support, similar travel restrictions for some of the players, I believe. So Ninja was not playing. In his place, there was this new player, Pink, is into his regional debut, and Nagi as support.
Pink is the player that I was referring to earlier, who was the Akiba independent circuit amateur.
And he played on the team with Gil, who's now Natsume.
That's correct. Yes.
So both of them. So both of these guys kind of came from the same cohort. And unfortunately, Pink did not have as okay a debut as Natsume. Pink was laning against Pyrion. Pyrion, I believe, was the better laning mid laner in the finals, actually, in LJL. I think he had a stellar performance on a lot of different picks, one of which was his versus Seros in game 1. He absolutely hammered Pink, who was playing Ramune. I think. Not Ramune, Rumble. Both other things. Don't know. See, Ramune played Rumble mid, so I was like, oh, Pink is playing Ramune.
But surely you say Ace, because Ace is our premier Rumble mid player.
I know. My brain is so out of it right now. He finished with... Pyrion ended having like over 100 CS up over him. But even then, Pyrion wasn't even the guy that really carried that game. Blank played Lee Sin. He had 100% kill participation right up until the Nexus fell, where they lost a couple in the base. Yutori Mashi was 5-0-5 on Ezreal, the premier AD carry, and Appaman continued to kind of stomp face on Aatrox, even though he did randomly die isolated, as he always does. So Sengoku really just came blasting out the gates. This is not early spring split Sengoku. They looked very much in form, very cohesive, and very scary.
Yeah, I do also want to point out like that this was Cog on Hecarim versus Appaman's Aatrox, you know, and like that's supposed to be a good matchup for the Hecarim. Blank made sure that was never going to be the case super early on. Like first blooded the guy, caught him way off guard, ganked way earlier than people were expecting. I think like, looking here,
I mean, I think personally the bigger deal was actually just the Blank's awareness on the map control and just knowing where Hachimetra was. Hachimetra is one of the junglers in the LJL who's normally able to prevent his jungle from being controlled. And we've seen the pathing he's done against Boogie and Steel before. So he's a jungler that's normally fine. Blank just kind of made the whole of Rascal Jester his bitch. And the rest of Sengoku were like, all right, we get to come along for the Blank ride. The Blank Knight's here, lads. It was great, honestly. And yeah, I definitely agree with Nymaera. Getting scary. I'm going to get to take, though, the game, which go watch this game. You can pause the don't pause the podcast. Don't pause the podcast. But after this podcast, I'm going to remind you at the very end to watch this game because it is our game of the week. It was the official stream's game of the week, and oh my, did it not disappoint us. Sengoku Gaming facing off against DFM. This was the rematch of the finals, the rematch of the Juggernaut match. The rematch of the 1-1 of spring split for these teams. Oh my, Sengoku looks scary.
Oh yeah, they did.
There are some caveats we have to put in here though. DFM's draft was unorthodox. Not necessarily incorrect, but unorthodox. And I believe that hurt them. But some key moments. Appaman at one point was 0-3-1. Gentlemen and listeners, he ended the game on 6-4-8. He eventually was able to 1v1 Ebby at 0-3-1, and with some assistance from Blank, kill him and then kill Steel. Sengoku won this game at 19-9 and played a very controlling game. This when we came out of it and we have our short break, one of the things that Nymaera and Initia1ise asked me is what do you think we should talk about? And I was like, the control Sengoku had. If this was different Sengoku, they would have played far more aggressively, really wanted to aggressively try and close this out. they did that, but far more in a controlled sense. DFM only got 2 dragons and 2 turrets. And that was early dragons because of Steel being Steel and a very, very good jungler. I was just so impressed. Pyrion had a masterclass against Syros, going 5-1 and 10, and played around the map. Blank, obviously, is the Blank Knight. Apperman is apparently able to take it to Ebby now, which is...
That's a really big thing. Just some context on that. I mean, Afman's been in the LJL for a while now, and he's always tried to take skill matchups into Ebby. Always.
And he never wins it.
It's basically never come down to him winning, and this time it did. Ebby did get a solo kill onto him, as far as I'm aware.
He did.
He got a solo kill. So it's like, okay, so it didn't go that way the entire game, but Afman at the end of the game was definitely getting the better of Ebby. Definitely muted him.
Oh, and obviously Yutori Moashi just goes 5-0 and 10, 5-0 and 11, and of course NT goes 0-1 and 11. It's like, oh, of course, yeah. And the thing is, DFM just looked a little bit frazzled, and Ebby was the only player who didn't look horrendously frazzled.
Kind of disagree. I actually think Ebby played this game really badly. I was very impressed with his
game. So comparing it to the rest of the members of DFM, I think he looked the best out of all of them.
No, so for me, he was one of the worst. Him and Gang really disappointed me.
Yeah. Interesting. We can talk about that later. This is not the time or the place in the podcast for that, but I will put a pin in that, gentlemen.
Well, we can get back to this game. We'll go back to it.
We'll definitely put a pin on it and come back to it. Though, I will definitely let Initia1ise come back and talk about his favourite team in a very positive light for him. Go on, sir. Take it away.
Yes. Well, next game was a little bit more what we come to expect from Detonation Focus Meet was, of course, Hawks versus DFM. Hawks coming back, having subbed out Ramone, put Dasher back to the mid lane. This is the guy who was sort of the MVP mid laner from 2019. All the other MVPs for the other roles were DFM. Dasher was the one exception.
Yep.
He went towards his infamous Aurelia. Tussle got on Nidalee. This new guy, Audemic, in the top lane. Well, I think he's ex.
He was USG as well. Audemic, Tussle, and Dasher are all USG.
Yeah. So it's the USG top side of the map coming back. And it wasn't pretty. Yeah, let's put it that way. This time it was Ebby on the Hecarim versus Audemic's Wukong, and this was Ebby looking much more comfortable. Steel picked up the Graves and looked a lot more comfortable. Seros got his Ziggs, did 6,000 damage pre-20 minutes in a single team fight. Like, it wasn't close. It started with an early solo kill by Ebby on the Hecarim versus the Wukong, after which point, Ebby playing weak side on that Hecarim would just ult away anytime anything else trying to happen on to him, whereas Aramik's Wukong, DFM would just find him and blow him up. Every team fight around objectives. There would be a Mega Inferno Pod, and an Onslaught of Shadows, and a bullet time, and a collateral damage, and they would disappear. Gang picked up Bard, and he looked really damn good on it as well.
0-0-15, my good sir.
Yeah. So damn good.
Yeah. No, I was very impressed by the Bard.
It was just phenomenal. And honestly, this was DFM for me. I mean, we expected this. We all predicted this game to go like this, but I don't know if we predicted it to be this bad or this good. Especially off of the performance they had versus Sengoku. Put a little bit of doubt in my head that maybe this might be a harder game for them to close. But no. There
were definitely points where the Hawks found some options to try and play around. Like, there was a point where Audemic had the level 6 to level 5 of the Hecarim, almost got a solo kill, and then he used ult in that, didn't get it. Hecarim comes back, levels up, kills Audemic, and then suddenly you've got that top diff coming into play. We talked about Wukong dying on the side lane and Hecarim surviving each time. That kind of started from this point. Dasher was doing well in the early laning phase on the Aurelia versus the Ziggs, doing fine. And then it came to this one point where he just loses his patience, goes in on the Ziggs, steals there, dies. And that's it. If Aurelia dies on her first all-in, uses all of her abilities and resources and summoners and whatever to try and get the kill, fails to do that. We saw this, famously we saw this versus Axis in their turnaround game with the Olaf Yumi game, where Hoglet just counter-ganked Dasher when he was playing Aurelia in the top lane versus Onyan's gangplank, and this Aurelia got super fed and died twice in the all-ins, and then suddenly just couldn't do anything for the rest of the game. This is that same kind of lacking patience from Dasher and the rest of the Hawks, which really cost them big.
Yeah, and that was definitely the tune in which we expected their next game to go. However, it ended up being the fastest game of the week, and one of the fastest games we've ever seen from the LJL, and just in competitive League of Legends. This was very much a stomp. But who was it in the favour of Nymaera? Give us a rundown of this game.
Oh, thank you for giving me the last one. It was the SoftBank Hawks, which beat out Rascal Jester, sending the Jesters to a 0-2 week. It sucks for them. Again, the Jesters picked something a little bit unorthodox. I mean, yeah, we're trying to reach towards the outside edge of the meta. They picked a Malphite top, and that was into a Wukong, it was into a Phalios, into Trundle, so lots of AD threats you can start building up armor against. Of course, it's not an AP Malphite, which you can play. I don't think that's actually that awful, but no, trying to go for this just hyper-initiation top play and use that unstoppable force. They had a Galio to layer over that as well. However, the Hawks, this game, as much as we were talking about them lacking patience in the game against DFM, played this game very, very well. There was a lot of teleports being timed in very good points for them. There was a massive fight in the bot lane, which went, I believe everyone but Cog teleported on the Malphite. A lot of kills went the way of the Hawks. Basically, every other fight from that point, resources were used very willy-nilly from Rascal Jesters. They didn't have them then to fight some very important objectives, and Dasher in particular on the Corki just absolutely tore apart Pink in this Corki versus Galio matchup. He ended up being ATCS up more than that even at the end of the game. He ended up almost having a Flame Horizon. It's also worth noting he went lethal tempo on the Corki, didn't go for something like Fleet Footwork or something like that. Tried to go for the heavy trades. He won all the heavy trades and just crushed this game.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be good for the Hawks moving forward is this is their main lineup. This is how they are planning to play, at least unless they want to substitute anyone in or out. This is going to be their default lineup that they have submitted. And I think while this is a Rascal Jester with 2 substitutes in, this must be a bit of a pick-me-up for the Hawks after their spring split and being at the very bottom of the table with no chance to come back unless they 2-0'd the last week. So you have to feel at least a bit good for the Hawks in the grand scale of things.
Yeah, you do. And, like, it was a really good show from Dasher. Like, he was ATCS, but, like a point to put in there. That's not ATCS, like, 30 minutes of the game. That was ATCS up at, like, 14, 15 minutes in the game. It was brutalized.
This game was only 21 minutes.
Yeah, his packages were really, really good as well. And that teleport in the bot lane was basically ended up a 5v4 because Cog didn't teleport. And then when Cog tried to teleport a little later, level 6, got interrupted by Aramik. And so he didn't turn up, and at that point, the teleport be blown, the unstoppable force never got to be used for kills, and it just snowballed horribly against Rascal Jester.
Yeah, he had to aggressively use his teleport back into lane early into the game, and then when Aramik eventually came back to the lane, and Cog tried to do the reverse play, Wukong knock up. Nice! Nice.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember if they caught out Tussle or something like that. They caught out someone just like kind of roaming up from lane into river, and they thought, okay, we can teleport him with Cog. They've got teleport advantage. It was
a bot lane play.
And then it just was cancelled by the Cyclone.
Yeah,
that was it. And then after that point, then they lose the fight from that. They had to flash out with Hatchemetra, I believe, as well. And it's like, okay, all right. So we tried to go for this one play which we've been setting up for, and it completely failed.
Yeah. So if you're a Hawks fan out there and you haven't watched any Hawks games after everything, don't go watch the DFM match because that's just not fun if you're a Hawks fan. But go watch the Rascal Jesters game. And yeah, if you want to watch the DFM game, there is hope. At least it doesn't look like they didn't. Well, they did kind of roll over and just take it towards the end.
No, don't watch the DFM one. But if you look at the Rascal Jester one, like it shows some very much needed improvement.
The first 10 minutes of the DFM game's okay. It's after 10 minutes. That's where it all goes wrong. And that patience that Nymaera has hit on a bunch really comes true because you can just see all of the members lose patience. It's like, mate, you've played 10 minutes of this game, you're already impatient, and you would have not survived. You would not have survived in Season 2 and Season 3 where games commonly went to 50 minutes. But as we've said, Sengoku and DFM is our game of the week over on our cast, and was also the official streams of game of the week. So we do implore you, if you're going to check out one game of the LJL this week, it would be that one.
However, if you really like stupid team fights, CGA Burning Core is continually proving to be my favorite LJL matchup. It's so stupid, I love it.
Oh my god.
It's just flabbergasting at what's happening, but it's also a very pure way of looking at League of Legends in another sense.
It's mechanical outplays, that's it.
Yes.
Solo queue, the matchup.
Yeah, very much so. But controlled solo queue. They've all got mics on. They're all in comms with each other.
control.
hear
It
the
might be
sound-
on mics, but I think it's more to flame each other than it is to
Yeah,
actually.
Oh, that's what I think it
You can hear
is.
the sound of the zoo. You can hear the sound of the zoo coming through your headphones.
It would be the kind of thing where I wish I could put mic check on and you could just listen to the players in that game.
Yes.
That would,
Oh,
and also we
days.
have to be like great at Japanese and everything else. So
Yeah.
get the
Have
closed
YouTube
captions
subtitles. Okay.
But gentlemen, as we have now done our brief recap, and we did it in pretty decent time. We've somehow normally done that for an hour and a half, and we did it in about 30 minutes. So I'm pretty happy with us. Pretty happy with us. That's normally
To the
one of the
point.
longer parts of our podcast. So I'm happy with that. Gentlemen, let's go over to our players of the week. And as we always do on the podcast, we cover each role and then we link it back to our overall player of the week. So you're going to get 6 players. We have individually done this ourselves. We obviously have talked a bit about this at the end of the cast on Monday or Sunday. It was Sunday, wasn't it? Yes, Sunday when we did our second cast and recapped the first 4 games. And we talked about it briefly at the end, but I think it's about time to get into this. Normally I say my one and then we rotate around and we say whose it was. So gentlemen, my top laner is not going to be a surprise as I was already singing his praises in his series. It was, of course, the man himself that has an emote in our server, Appermen, gets my top laner of the week.
Okay, so who do you want us to go next? Well, it doesn't matter.
Don't mind.
For me,
Oh, okay.
for me, it was also Afferman, and it looks like on our document, Sam has written the same thing. We are all in agreement, gentlemen.
There you go. Third time is indeed the charm. Yeah, Apperman had a fantastic week. He did Apperman things.
He did.
Sometimes that meant Apperman things with a thumbs up, and sometimes that meant Apperman things with me putting my hands in my, face in my hands in despair. But it was entertaining, and he played it really well, especially when he was behind, actually.
Yes, this was a man who definitely has looked somewhat flippant in their ability. But this week, if he's starting off this high, and Apperman, in my eyes, definitely is a momentum player. If they start off good or they start off meh, it takes them a while to get going. He's already starting at like kind of a higher apex level than I expect from them. And if they always go up. Apperman is normally always goes up. If they're going up already, oh god, we're going to have some fun top lane battles and I can't wait.
Yeah, no, Apperman, for once, actually showed quite a well-rounded game. His laning phase was fine. The early lane and the early game versus DFM, that was a bit more shaky, and that's why we kind of talk about Apperman things. He got ran down a couple of times. And when he got into side lanes again, he kind of died isolated, but kind of in the old Darien way of speaking about the game, particularly against Axes when he was getting run down in the Aatrox. His team took Baron, and they took something big, and they took a big fight somewhere, or he ended up burning a load of different cooldowns. So he had a very high value game, even when he was losing out individually.
Yeah, and like he reminds me a little bit in some ways of that the pressure valve style that I know Papa Smithy was talking about with Initia1ise at Season 7 Worlds, where yes, it looks like he's dying a lot, and sometimes that's really bad because he's just dying a lot, and he's got like the highest isolated death count in the league by quite a long way.
Yeah.
But sometimes the team just needs him to be that pressure valve where he does just shove up a wave, put pressure down, draw people to him, look to outplay. And every now and then, every game and then, he does that really, really well. And he team fights so well, so confidently. His flanks on the Aatrox in particular are worth keeping an eye on.
It's why last spring he was our only person to play Yorick and really pull that pressure. And I totally agree. He pulls more pressure out of other teams than I think almost any other player
Oh
really
yeah, because he blind shoves with no wards. It's wonderful.
But that disrespect is beautiful because a lot of teams, especially the lower tier teams in the LJL, almost have no answer to him half the time because they're just why is he doing no one else does this except for Eddie and Ray Farkey,
when he's on Aatrox, very much so. His command of that champion is really, really good, and he builds slightly tankier, slightly less towards the damage.
He does,
slightly more towards the
he's got a very unique build.
Yeah, he often goes Spirit Visage third after, so he goes like Black Cleaver, Dash Dance, and Spirit Visage rather than the Sterax, which is kind of more anti-burst, whereas the Spirit,
And then when Guardian Angel Like he went the Spirit of the Side straight into Guardian Angel, and he almost will aggressively build. We saw at least against the Wukong, aggressively build a Bramble Vest.
That was a big one for me. Yeah, he ends up. So in that game against DFM, he ended up being really tanky really early into the game, because his team was kind of already doing damage. So he knew his role really well. That impressed me quite a lot.
Blank was just stupid.
Yeah, no, Blank was ridiculously good this week. I'm going to keep indexing back towards that. But yeah, no, Afman. For once, I was very happy with Afman, and I wasn't shirking on him
I was more trying to back up your point with that, because like your main person that's going to come in and help you is going to be the jungler, and because of that, he was able to go that Bramble Vest and Ninja Tabbies very, very early. So it's nice to see him be this controlled and flexible, and that's why I said controlled against DFM. But gentlemen, I think we should go on to our next lane. I'm going to throw it over to Initialize to begin us here.
This is a man I've had a lot of faith and a lot of credit for across a number of weeks now, a number of games now, a number of years now. It's Blank in the jungle for me.
I will also be joining you. Nymaera, your jungler?
Is also Blank.
Very good. We're in agreement that Sengoku on their 2-0 currently are the best 2-0 team in our standings. So
I will add in the caveat, honorable mentions to Boogie. I also think that his particular his game versus Axes in that mid lane 2v2 was really, really good. Particularly in that potentially a losing lane matchup of Galio versus Corki, just completely blew that wide open and won the game off that. No, Boogie had a really good series too, but Blank was huge.
Blank was huge. Initialize, take us over first.
So the reason I put Blank in here over Boogie was actually Boogie had again a very good week. His Elise game was also really strong, but for me it was Blank. He was the reason I feel, or one of the major reasons Sengoku Gaming beat the teams they did in the way they did. He played it on two very different champions and two very different styles. It was the Lee Sin game, the first one, where it was really great early snowball, comes into lane pre 3 minutes, gets the first blood, runs over the game, goes 5-0-8. Fantastic game on the Lee Sin, just really good aggressive early pressure. You can sort of see why the LPL likes to go towards the Lee Sin when someone plays that way. The second game was on the Graves versus DFM. Farms super well and basically shows why Graves is really good in the fact that phase rush means you can't catch the man. And he was surviving 2-3 people trying to dive him. He was surviving Pantheon stuns and Wukong engages. He was getting out and running away. And yeah, he died a couple times, but he bought about 20-30 seconds even, where he just took so long to die. And it was very impressive.
He had Death Stance and Ocean Soul versus like 0 healing reduction. And he just couldn't die.
No, he wouldn't. And it was just such a phenomenal performance by Blank. And it really feels like we are actually starting to get to see the Blank Knight. It took me... I'm okay if it takes us a split to start seeing this level of play from Blank. Because, oh my, if we're basically going to be saying Blank... No, Boogie has a true rival outside of Steel. Now we've got a trifecta. It's going to be super interesting to see these teams play against each other. And that's not to say that other junglers aren't good. Not to say that it didn't actually surprise us and impress us even. And not that other junglers haven't. It's just going to be very interesting to see these because there were very high expectations of Blank, former world champion.
And particular, well, of course, he did spend that summer split last year in the region as well. He was a little bit 1v9 on his team, didn't particularly work out in that last iteration, the Sengoku lineup. But I think it's really important to kind of dig a little deeper on that point that you made there, Lexi, because why is it important that there's a trifecta of junglers? Why is it important that it's not just Boogie and Steel? Of course, we saw Blank turn up towards the end of the split. His early split was kind of crappy. He really didn't achieve much. Excuse me. We talked so much about, complacency, the level of play in Japan and the LJL, and what we expect out of this region. You can't expect good practice if you don't have good practice partners, and this always, it only serves to better the region. So I'm hoping that this lineup stays together from Sengoku a bit longer, that they do make it well in summer and give DFM a challenge, and that we see some real level of play in LJL.
Yeah, you learn more in defeat, as they've always said, and I think we can all reign true that in any form of competitive endeavors we have each participated in, and maybe this is Sengoku really learning a lot from those defeats in the early spring, as this is the 5 unit that has stayed together from spring, and maybe those defeats against DFM in the finals, they want it hard, and that's where it went. Nymaera?
Yes.
You are our resident mid laner, and thus why I gave Initialize the jungle. Can you please tell me your mid laner of this week?
So my mid laner was Arya, and Arya has just done some crazy things. 2 unique picks this week. He was crazy.
Initialize?
It's hard not to put him in there. It's Arya again. 2 career first on 2 champions that have been super high priority for a while now. He looked dominant on both, but great numbers out. And that casting game, oh my days.
I am also joining them both. I pulled really hard thinking that Pyrion actually performed better, and I ran it multiple times through, but every time I came up with a reason, Arya was always technically just a little bit better, so has to be Arya.
Yeah, and I also honorable mentioned Pyrion in my list as well. He did some very crazy stuff this week. Like I said, he absolutely just ran through Pink in their first game, and Zoe against DFM was one of the very big reasons why they won. But Arya, guy's a legend, dude.
Legit best mid laner at the moment in my eyes in the region.
He's
like
very good,
Pyrion is definitely very, very, very close for me, but Arya just pulsed it. Arya won one of those games for CGA. Just won them. The Kassadin game would not be a one unless it were Arya was playing there. Maybe other mid laners could have done that, but the way he played, phenomenal. Go on,
Nymaera. Were in the lead.
Yeah, they were. They were initially.
They were in the lead, and then there was a triple kill that was almost a pentakill.
Well, and speaking of that, so so Arya last split had, I believe it was 2 quadras, 1 triple, and 3 doubles, something like that. In that game alone, Arya on the Kassadin, where he finished like 12-2 or something, had 2 triple kills and 3 double kills. He had 5 multi kills in one game. That is beyond absurd. That is beyond absurd. The guy just solo carried a game. He's
disappointed in his stats from last split, and he's like, I didn't get the unofficial cast overall MVP. Well, I'll pull my socks up and do them one better. And now we're like looking at this like, blank, man, you gotta try real hard so far. And also our other players we will mention later as well.
No, the thing about him winning in this week in particular is that actually I was very impressed by Pyrion too. You know, like this was one of the harder ones for me because, you know, like we'll talk about it a bit more because I'm sure we'll revisit the DFM Sengoku game in a little bit. But like this is definitely the role I was like, oh crap, who do I pick for the most for actually a little while.
Yeah, this was the hardest decision, I will be honest, across all of them. I really wanted to put Pyrion in, and I wanted to. I actively wanted to, but every time I came up with a reason, I was like, oh, what about gold per minute? Oh no, Arya wins that. Oh, what about multi? Oh no, multi kills goes there. What about map control? No, Arya was everywhere. I'm like, every time, CS per minute. I came up for every stat, and I went through so much, and every time I looked at it, I was like, I guess Arya only lost in vision score, and that's not a good enough of a reason to not give an MVP.
Our unanimous top and jungle are both from Sengoku as well.
They are.
You know, he has had 2 people massively well performing on his team, and that does make you look better. Whereas Arya is like took the games by the scruff of the neck and goes, "Look, okay, we're winning now. Let's go. Have some fun."
Pyrion beat Syros, and we're not giving it to the man that beat Syros. Definitively.
I mean, I have my thoughts on that. I'm not sure.
We'll touch on that later.
But for those ones, I actually for Sengoku Gaming, I had so much time for Blank and Apperman. Like Pyrion was fantastic. Oh my days, he was fantastic. But it was like he was there following on this incredible juggernaut train of Blank and Apperman steamrolling teams.
And that's where we are at, gentlemen. Let us go on to our bot laners. As I went first for the top laners, I will reveal my AD carry, but no one's going to be too surprised with where I'm going with this. It's Yutori Muashi. The man himself is back, and god damn do I love him performing and getting a flawless week. No deaths.
Very good.
Initialize. Who's your bot laner?
I'm joining you there with Yutori Muashi.
Smart man.
He did a lot of damage, stayed alive, didn't die. Fabulous KDA, fabulous kill participation. Hard to complain.
Go on, Nymaera. Who is your...
We have our first discrepancy. I've gone with Archer. Gone with Archer. I did not go for Yutori Muashi.
Well, as we always do, minority defends their point first to give all fairness, so all are understanding where they're coming from. So, Nymaera?
Okay, so first off, you told me actually had 2 games of an Ezreal. That's one of the reasons why I had to kind of take it a little bit away from him. Because Ezreal is just so ridiculously strong right now in laning phase and team fights and stuff. I do think you told me actually was very, very good, and I very nearly put him as my MVP as well, of course. Archer did have 2 games on Aphelios, another very strong champion, but it felt like he was making a lot of really good plays. You know, he did have one kind of stupid death in lane versus, was it Axis, I think it was? Yeah, it was against Axis, I believe it was. But besides that, his team fights were utterly ridiculous. There's one point where like he flashes over a blue buff wall to get like a triple Infernum combo with like all auto Q and just like shreds an entire team there. I think that he made a lot of big plays. He looked very confident. He looked back to his winning ways, which he didn't really find against CGA and DFM and stuff like that in playoffs. He kind of struggled a bit there. So I'm glad to see him back in form. And for me, he was my player of the week for ADC. ADC of the week.
I think the points you raised were pretty fair. And at the end of the day, listeners, viewers, all of them out there, these are our opinions. And so we are allowed to disagree with each other. I think that's fair. I almost did put Archer. Problem is, he died. And then whenever I look at, I look back on it and I'm like, and I also don't have a problem with someone playing Ezreal. Frankly, I love to not see someone play Aphelios because it feels like all we saw in Spring Split was Aphelios. So the Ezreal cleanse is currently happening. At some point, I will probably be like Nymaera, and I will be sick of the champion. But I also enjoy Ezreal a lot more than Aphelios. So.
No, I can understand that. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, so personal preferences.
Great.
Yeah, good Ezreals are fun to watch. They do get some of the best hype reels, but I do also think Aphelios just has a higher ceiling, as we did see a 3v1 over in the LE.
4v1.
4v1 was it?
4v1.
Oh, the Yuumi was there. I didn't even realize the Yuumi was there.
Yeah. It was Yuumi Ezreal together.
So, I just really think Yutori popped off. I think he was protected really well by his team. He was allowed to carry. And for me, which pushes it over the board, he beat DFM without dying.
That's a big thing. That's huge. It is. It is huge.
And it looked confident. Granted, though, part of what we're going to talk about later is that draft from DFM and the unorthodox that came through. And, well, actually, it wasn't the unorthodox, the lane. It was the play of the lane.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. There's a whole lot of stuff which is interweaving, and DFM, you can see what they're going for. You can see what they're going for when they're doing stuff. It's just, it wasn't firing on all cylinders, and that's kind of problematic because we're talking about DFM. We expect very high things of them. However, you know, it takes a good team to punish them, and Sengoku very much did.
Yes. Initia1ise, any other reasons why you also picked Yutori? I apologize. I did take a little bit of the limelight of the supporting team.
No. I think this is just another one of those things where he just does a lot of damage consistently and just does it very, very safely. Like, that's kind of all you can ask for an AD carry in a lot of ways, is consistent DPS, don't die doing it, and be up in CS, do a lot of damage to your towers, turn up in those fights. Like, there's not a lot that he did wrong. Like, it was just a high level of excellence.
It was. And at the end of the day, that was it. Interesting. We've had our first disagreement as a three-way couple. So maybe we can get back on the horse. I don't know. Initia1ise, would you bring us in for your support of this week, sir?
I absolutely can, and it will be Reiner, V3 support, who just really impressed me. Number of other sports kind of had, like, there was a lot of teams that went 1-1. I went, that was a great game. That was an awful game. Gang comes to mind. That Maokai was concerning. Reiner's had 2 Thresh games, looked really, really good on it. And I've kind of had this thought for a while. I know I've mentioned it before, but for me, the Archer's good. Reiner is excellent. And I genuinely think this man is very, very, very talented. His lanterns throughout both games in particular really impressed me. There were a number of double flays in a lane.
May I just stop you from gushing here for just a moment? Just so we can get the rest of our picks in.
Of course, sorry guys.
It's okay. It's okay. That's why I'm aware. The passion just came through. I saw it. Nymaera, who is your support of the week?
Do I get to gush now as well? Because I've also picked Reiner.
You can gush for a few moments. I'll give you that.
He's so great. He's the best supported league. He's doing great. His thresh is wonderful. He flash hooks and misses, but he gets really good phases. And you can go now. It's fine. Good.
I also agree with both of you. Reina was also my support of the week, and he was just outright the unbelievable. He saved his team from a 3-man dive. He saved Archer from a 3-man dive on his own, which is just phenomenal. He was everywhere, and I was really impressed by him.
I have to say, there were some good support performances this week as well. It wasn't completely barren.
No, that wasn't.
But you can point out people like Gang having a really awkward Maokai performance. He was playing that alongside a Senna. So, like, Pooh had a really good late game on the Thresh alongside Honey against Jesters, but then, like, his set game was kind of meh.
But
and then,
even
like,
our other 3-0 teams, so we've got Grendel.
CJ I thought Grendel was pretty okay. I thought Corporal was pretty good too. There was competition there. It wasn't a barren thing.
And Enti only died once across 2 games, but one of those was on a Yuumi. So we all know Nymaera, and to be honest, we all share the same sentiment. If you play a Yuumi, it means half as much.
Yeah.
But I also love turning my brain off in solo queue and playing Yuumi. So.
I want to have an interesting... Actually, do you mind if I have a quick conversation about that? Because I was having a chat with someone on Twitter, and it came into regards
Twitter drama.
with Ezreal, actually, and it applies to Yuumi as well.
Yeah.
At what point is a champion so strong that someone should not be considered for MVP, or at least have that massively taken into account when they are playing that champion? So, for instance, we've seen Ezreal played by some ridiculously good players across the globe. Ezreal does stupid things. Aphelios is the same story. Yuumi is the same story. What about some of our priority top laners like Wukong? At what point is it impact on the game versus how this guy is playing on the champion comparative to how it should be played? That's a big question for me, and it does apply to us in podcasts too.
I don't have a problem with Yuumi's personally. I think so the whole reason, and it's something we actually talked about on actually I think it was in our practice casts, and it's something that I have said to Nymaera and Initialize. Ban Yuumi means certain team comps are like half as powerful. Yes, you can slot in Karma in some spots and some other champions, but Yuumi offers a very unique perspective into playing certain team comps, especially carry junglers and AD carries. Yeah. That's why if you ban Yuumi, suddenly Ezreal gets a little bit worse. Suddenly Graves and Olaf, well, Olaf is just almost off the map now, but you can't draft Olaf. Makes Graves a little bit worse in certain spots, and certain carry top laners and mid laners get a little bit worse.
Yeah, I think Yuumi's not the issue. It's more like, particularly if you've got something like an Olaf, a Graves, or an Ezreal or something like that, with like a whole team which is designed to enable them. Say like an Olaf with like the Soraka and a Yuumi and all the other stuff. A Lulu, right? We saw Lulu come out of Burning Core. Like, at what point is the carry player actually not actually responsible for their own performance?
Yeah.
That's very difficult to discern.
Well, that's why I'm bringing up the question. That's why we talk about it.
It's also like, it's sometimes that question as well. It's like, well, is it the champion that's broken or the item that's broken? They just happen to synergize really well with that champion. It's similar. Yuumi becomes a kind of super active item in a lot of ways, right? Like she adds that. Yeah, exactly. She is a TFT item. There you go. But that's that kind of element. Like, add it to a Graves or an Olaf, and like that champion is just 2 times as effective often.
I would argue, though, we saw this week a phenomenal Yuumi performance, a genuinely phenomenal Yuumi performance that could have carried a game. However, it's through Yuumi, through a support, and the rest of the team weren't good enough to carry that. That was Proud playing Yuumi this week on Burning Core. He played genuinely out of his mind on Yuumi. I know what you're thinking, listeners. You're like, why? This is the Burning Core CGA game. Trust me. Go watch it. He played so good on this Yuumi, but couldn't carry his team. And this was with a Rayfarki on Wukong and Yuhi on his Aphelios, and couldn't carry it. There were other problems in that game for Burning Core, really. But
mainly one by the name of Kassadin.
And Arya on it. It doesn't matter how good your Yuumi is.
Darth Vader vibes going on there.
Oh, 100%. But I would respond to you with that question. Yuumi does not allow your team to just carry through the
I agree. No, I just think it's an interesting thing to bring out because it kind of sets up the context of us. Why are we choosing this? It also comes back to like, why did I not choose Utori Mesh? I'm like, well, I also think Ezreal makes players look really good. It kind of plays into that. Aphelios, you can say the same thing, so you can use that against me too.
Oh, that's
like, just giving a bit of insight into what we're thinking with our votes. Yeah. It's not quite as straightforward.
Yeah. And Enti had a very good performance, but it was on the Yuumi, and it wasn't the same Yuumi performance that I saw from Proud. If it was that performance, 100% Enti gets it. I'm sorry, but it wasn't, and that's why I gave it to Reina, and that's why I think we all agreed that Reina's Thresh was...
It's very, very good. Very, very good.
Just a quick point of order. Remember, guys, it's Reina now, not
Reina. Reina, thank you.
If you're mispronouncing it, It would be R-E-I if it was Ray.
I need to look at it differently. I need to definitely just adjust my dyslexic brain and go, it's not Raina, how it says in my head phonetically.
Split the N from the A.
But phonetically, it's Raina.
It's not phonetically. It's not phonetically in Japanese. Phonetically in Japanese, it's Raina.
But it's not spelt like that.
It is spelt like that. This is how it's spelled if I put the dashes in there. That's how it's spelled.
Yes, but
there you go.
But that's it. But in katakana, it's whatever. We're talking about languages now, and I know.
I will go there. I will sit down and do this.
Nymaera.
Yes.
Your player of the week, sir, if you may.
As much as I've argued
so
about
I don't get
Raina
tutored by another English major.
My player of the week is Blank from the jungle.
Okay. Fair. I will agree with you as well. Blank.
Fantastic. Lovely. Lovely.
Such a performance this week, so I will agree with you. And Initialize?
My box appears to be empty. One could say it's blank. Just brilliant.
Nymaera.
I don't keep it just a cast, guys. These come out at all times.
Nymaera, would you start us off with why you picked him as your player of the week?
I mean, he was utterly ridiculous in both games on two very different picks, playing against two very different teams, and he won just as confidently in both games. Particularly against DFM, there was a botched level 1, which makes things very difficult, and it just didn't matter. Blank was just imperious. He was running around the map. He was getting 100% kill participation in the early games everywhere he went, and controlled all the objectives, scaled up very well, never took his eye off the win condition, and just ran over the games.
Yeah, go on, Initialize.
Same sort of deal, just played to the win conditions. The
Lee
Sin in the first... The Lee Sin was really aggressive early on, and was just 20 seconds ahead of what everyone else was trying to do. So there wasn't quite the response time for... who was it against? Rascal Justice was just that touch off. Cold gets caught out because it's not the 3-minute 15 gank, it's the 2-minute 50. That kind of thing was really consistent with the Lee Sin, which very much impressed me. Versus DFM, it was just a really good read on where DFM's global comm wanted to end up. He was always there wherever the Dawning Shadow, the Zerath ult, the Pantheon ulting in. He was always there to turn it around. It turns into a lot of what should have been clean kills for DFM into really easy turnarounds because he just turned up and blew people up.
Yeah, and I mean, the end of the game, he also had just 100 CS, almost more than Steel. He was aggressively taxing lanes when Pyrion or Apperman wasn't there. He was always farming up. He had more farm than everybody except for 3 CS off of Ebby and about, a shitload behind Syros. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you got shitloads of farm. If your whole team loses and you've only ever died this game and done a bit of participation through your ultimate, it doesn't matter. And Blank was just so good at punishing people in those lanes where they thought they might get some reprieve. He just aggressively was on people in both Rascal Jester, where he just basically counter jungled Hachimetra and took his jungle, which is not something he's used to. And God, what a performance from Sengoku this week, really. And
very good.
Oh, but by the way, Blank's gold difference at 15 across these two games was 1,300.
That's absurd from the jungle position. That is absolutely absurd.
He just put people in the dirt, man.
That's just getting half an item ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
Just minimum.
And this is not even against Unica, who's coming in new to CGA. It's not against Hoglet, who was slumping. This is it's against Hachimetra and Steel.
What? I understand. I understand that Pantheon is not a good farmer. I understand that, but
this is Pantheon who got first blood,
right? Exactly. That's kind of, but that's the context, right? Pantheon that got first blood, and then every time he tried to do something, ended up being punished for it.
Yeah,
huge.
But part of that was also Appermen's doing, and part of that was then Blank's response back
to that. It all works
together.
And
Pyrion assisting, and NT doing early roams, and this was just Sengoku as a unit playing for fucking out their minds, really. Just so good.
Very good.
And doing that against DFM, oh man, DFM are gonna learn from their mistakes and come back hungry. And oh man, week 4, LJL, tune in. It's gonna be good.
It's gotta be good.
We'll have our peak casters and hosts in their respective roles for that game. I think that's definitely what we'll
That'll be you doing all of them with them, will it?
Oh, of course. I'll be play-by-play. color and the host with the most.
That's it.
Just doing everything.
The arc caster. You've heard of mages and archmages. This is the arc caster. It's the magical upgrade.
Yes.
Pretty sure it's a weapon in something.
That's the arc. That's a Halo 3 thing, right? The arc of the
caster.
Covenant?
No.
Is it Destiny?
Might be a Destiny thing.
I don't know Destiny.
I'll have a look later. We'll find it. Something up there. Tell us. Tweet at us. Not about League of Legends, but about random weapons that we don't know.
It's a Star Wars thing. It's a Star Wars thing.
Battlefront. Star Wars Battlefront. That's what it's from. Yeah. Okay, all right, we're back. But
that
was a moment of nostalgia for me.
Let's recap a little bit. I know I said you were extravagant and vivacious. I know both of you like to go OTT a little bit, gentlemen. But let's bring it back and go in to some of the parts that we've hinted about throughout this cast. And let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about some unexpected performances, moments, drafts, and things happen not necessarily bad, just unexpected. We'll get into more disappointing things a little bit later, where we'll cover that. But let's go into our first one. I believe Initial1ise made this point, but it might be Nymaera. More Hecarim's than you expected. Who made this point?
I think Sam wrote it down.
Sam wrote this down. Brilliant.
Just obviously looking around the rest of the world, we know Hecarim got a few buffs. I was kind of not expecting to see as much Hecarim. I was expecting a bit more focus on maybe the Wukong if we're going the way the LPL are, or maybe looking at how the LCS and the LEC are doing. Maybe the set, maybe the Mordekaiser still around, the Ornn. No, Hecarim turned up a few times and looked surprisingly good in some of them. Like Ebby's Hecarim in particular, maybe go, oh yeah, I'm happy to see Teleport Ignite back in the top lane. That sounds like a lot of fun to me.
I think you slightly misspoke because at Wukong, out of the 8 games we had, was pick or ban 100%.
Yeah,
so
yeah, exactly. Huge presence. Don't get me wrong. But that was kind of what I was expecting. Wukong focus. That's the one that's going to be really important. Yes. But Hecarim came out of there. It's kind of cool.
Pulled 2 bans out and was played in the other 6 games. Definitely a good performance. But I would agree with you. Those buffs that happened to Hecarim, I think I was also not expecting. It's not the crazy thing like you said, Initial1ise. It's not crazy to see him out. It's just
it's not unusual. Sorry, Karen.
No, I think that's fair. I think that Tom Jones song sums it up fairly. And it's not unusual to fall in love with Hecarim, but it's also not the time I was fully expecting him. But the spots he came out wasn't crazy as well.
I mean, we saw, 2 games from the Hecarim, was it? Was it 2, 3?
It was only 2.
Only the 2. So it was by Ebby and it was by Kokog. And Ebby showed it working really well in hyper teamfight situations, particularly if someone's playing a dive comp and they all kind of clump up. Hecarim just denies them their dive. Because the whole idea is that if you're trying to dive in and do this, there's basically this hurdle of the amount of damage you need to do in this set window of time when you're diving to kill someone off or force someone out of a fight before kind of everyone collapses onto you because you've dove in. You're in very close range. All the damage can be dealt to you.
Yep.
Hecarim really just extends that window because you're feared, you are zoned, and if you'll clump up, your dive just completely fails. It's like diving into a cannon ult. We saw that in CGA Rascal Gesture, or was it CGA V3 when we had Echo diving into a cannon. It just doesn't work. Same kind of thing with the Hecarim. You dive into it, things go bad. Yeah, and you can engage too. Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just kind of what it was. Let's move on to our next point, which is going to be CGA still placing a huge amount of reliance on Arya, but it wasn't bad because Arya was more than happy to step up to that play. And it's not necessarily CGA played poorly, it's more Arya's clearly this key point. And I mean, Arya picked up our overall MVP of the mid laner unanimously across us. So clearly doing something right. Correct, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about, oh man, they just index on this player so much. But when you've got someone the caliber of Arya, or, back into Season 5 Faker, or Season 3 Faker, or all these other players, I don't know, maybe Upset on Origin, someone like that, who has this caliber of performance, is it actually a weakness to rely on them? Well, no, not really if people can't exacerbate it, or can't take advantage of it, right? And the thing for me is that
RNG made a career out of it.
Yeah, they did.
Easy. It's something which Lexi has been talking a lot about. It's like CGA, when they draft, they're very like face up. But now if they're picking red side and they're last picking for Ardia, this guy's got the largest champion pool of mid laners in the region now. He's actually overtaken Ninja.
Oh, is he?
I believe.
Well, because Ninja didn't get to play this week, so...
With the 2 unique picks as well, though, remember? Yeah, I think he's overtaken him. I think he was only one behind him coming into this week.
Okay.
And he's picked 2, so he overtakes.
Well,
as far as I'm aware.
Ninja, you need to get back soon so you can reclaim your throne as just playing more random shit than Arya.
I suspect Arya had a slightly better KDA, though. Like, he's got some absurd KDAs with his champion.
So, yeah, Arya's got, like, 4 champions he's played more than twice with a KDA of 10 or more. His Silas, he's played, like, 11 games and has a KDA of, like, 11.25. Something like that. Absolutely absurd. But the thing for me about Arya is that because he has such a large, utterly successful champion pool, if you counter-pick from him, he has a wide array of champions to pick into any given composition, and it will be perfect for it. Like the Castan, right? Doesn't work into every comp, but in another comp, he could have picked Syndra. He could have picked Kiana, something like that. He has all these different options. Definitely works well.
Definitely works well indeed. Sorry, I was trying to do something with my microphone muted for a split second, and I was like, "Can someone?" No one jumped in, so I was just like, "All right, that's fine."
So I've not got your camera.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sometimes a little bit blank.
I think, let's actually move over to a completely different team this time. And let's actually go and talk about the Hawks, because we had some positive things to relatively say about the Hawks and Dasher in that mid lane. Let's focus on the fact that the Hawks first went 1-1. So that, as I said earlier, when we talked about the Hawks in their games, this has to be some improvement. They had one of the fastest games in the LJL. This was a team that, you know what, actually performed pretty reasonably this week. Yes, they had a horrendous game against DFM, but then they pulled it back, and Dasher seems to be a lot happier in this mid lane than the top lane.
Let me spin you an analogy.
Go on.
Go for it.
Dasher here is a little bit like Anakin Skywalker in that he has great power, great potential, but he's not been granted the rank of Master yet. He just needs to show a little more patience. And we saw what happens when he gives into the hate, gives into the rage, goes 1-5 on Irelia because he dives in, gets baited, gets exhausted, and there turns out there's a jungler waiting in the bush to come murder him alongside a Ziggs. And then he loses in a 1v1 to a Misfortune, and the Misfortune then proceeds to like effectively 1v3. That's not good. But you could see the mechanics were still there, and the patience wasn't, and that was the problematic thing.
You know what?
We start to see.
Sam, you know the analogy stretches further with that though, because you know the whole thing about Anakin in episode 3 is that Mace Windu sat there and said like, if this proves to be true, you will have gained my trust. And the whole idea is that he's waiting for Anakin to be patient enough to not follow him to the fight with Palpatine, and then he would have granted him the rank of Master. So he rushes off in Game 1 versus DFM, and he becomes Darth Vader. Perhaps this is the alternate reality where he stays.
Yeah, well, he certainly had the power of Darth Vader in that second one, because that Corki game was just a lot. Like, it was the aggression.
Lightsaber igniting.
No. The aggression was still there, but it was great to see. Lee's was bullying the Galio in lane. And it was against a less coordinated team, so perhaps his aggression wasn't being punished as much. But even so, it was just a lot more coordinated, looked a lot more controlled. The mechanics and style were still there, but it was just without the blinding gauges.
I think the thing for me, particularly in that game against the Jester, he's like, oh, it's against a less coordinated team. It's still against a team that was still trying to make aggressive plays on the same page. You know, they were still, going for these big plays. They were all on the same page. That's the important thing, right? They were just out-thought, out-macroed, outplayed. You know, there was a point when Malphite was trying to fight around the top side, and then Dasher teleports in with package and just plays around that fight exceptionally. You don't take that for granted. Muted, Lexi.
Completely agree. Yeah, it's fine. That's cool. I'll keep talking. And he's back.
Oh, I'm back. I mean, I do have a slight rebuttal to that, though. The Jesters basically had a repeat game from what they had against Sengoku. And Sengoku were just playing it a little bit more safe against the Jesters. They were, we're going to stomp you, but we're not going to freaking destroy you. Blank's not going to go for almost sacrificing his perfect game. Pyrion did, and Apperman did Apperman things. But against the Hawks, just stomped Rascal Jester in just a harder sense. Same amount of kills that Rascal Jester got, one more kill on the side of the Hawks than to Sengoku. And yes, they had a 21-minute game to a 25-minute game. It raises certain questions that we have on certain players on the Jesters, I think, and that is mostly Pink and Nuggy. the substitutes, which we'll talk about later.
We'll talk about them later.
Section, but question marks are there. Spam question mark there.
The thing for me about the Hawks in general is that, I mean, like, anything is an improvement from last split. If you look back to week 6, 7, when I think it was week 6 when they played the Galio Akali Tarek comp against Sengoku, and they played Galio twice or something like that, and like, it's a very obvious combo. Again, it's like playing a Malphite. It's like playing, you know, some
Press
very just
R where the fight is happening.
So I think it's like LS has another piece of terminology known as like they're gentleman champions. They're very straight up about what they're going to do. They don't hide something from you. They are very much what it says on the tin, and they couldn't pull it off. Like, they were fluffing the engage. The coordination wasn't there. This is a massive improvement off of that. They're saying the Hawks at the end of last split would not have been able to pull off this game. Maybe it's just a lucky roll of the dice. Broken clocks right twice a day, but if it's going to happen, it has to start like this. So it's still something.
Yes, absolutely. Our next little nice point is something that we've noticed while looking over the scoreboards, pick and ban phase, and everything else. Seems to be that TF only pulled 2 bans this week. No picks, only 2 bans. And it was also against Sengoku, meaning that Pyrian's TF is definitely doing something in scrims.
Yeah, I think I believe he played on SK a couple of times. I'm trying to remember if he has any match history on that champion. But yeah, I mean, being an SK KT laner, we assume he has, you know, that Korean champion pool, which so many of those professional players have. They can play everything. Sengoku are a team which seem very coordinated, seems to know their macro stuff. It would be very scary if Pyrian has picked up this champion, so we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and like, for a guy who plays super well with teleport as well, TF adds a second one. Sounds pretty good to him.
Yeah.
I mean,
TF is definitely viable in the meta at the moment. He's not seeing a huge amount of play around the world at the moment, but something we've talked about off stream is that, yeah, he could definitely start being a good pick. I mean, Pyrian was playing him in LEC in the summer 2019, and he had one game. He did lose, but I think it's good.
That team lost a lot.
Yeah, but I think it's worth noting that even a year ago, he was willing to pick up TF. So that he definitely has it in his wheelhouse, that TF, and he's got several games. It's not his most played champion by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty far down there. He's played it more than Ari, so in my book, that's a good place to be starting.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, and a pro place. I mean, we saw Faker play TF over at the Mid-Season Cup. It's been banned against him a couple of times as well. I'm trying to remember if it was... So he played at last Worlds too. I mean, it's been cropping up a little bit in some situations.
Nemesis loves it.
Nemesis has been playing it. He's not... Although Nemesis have been having a bit of a shaky split, and that TF game was not the best from him.
I know, but he's doing it in spring. He was doing it last year.
Sure. And yeah, no, it's a proof of concept, and it's a very different style to what Sengoku play. If they can play that style, that is very good from my perspective, because for me, Sengoku can be a bit one-dimensional. This would potentially open up those options.
Yes, it potentially could. The rest of the games he actually played, all of it was when Thunderlords was out, and it was all the way back in NA LCS.
Oh gosh.
So very long time ago.
Wow.
And then he pulled it back out for LEC 2019.
Pyrian on P1.
He never did it. So he played on Phoenix One, and Team Impulse in NA.
Impulse. That was the team. He's been around, dude.
He's been around, but I mean, his showing currently in the LJL outweighs his performance.
Absolutely.
He was alright on SKT until he went 0-9-2 on Orianna. Then he was never played again.
Yeah, that was not so good.
Was not so good, but this TF ban is definitely worth looking at. And another ban that our resident jungle expert Initia1ise has noticed is that Fiddlesticks keeps getting banned against Hachimecha.
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it, Initia1ise? Why do you think that is?
So, I mean, Fiddlesticks obviously has had his rework kind of in between when Pro was happening and now, so we haven't seen him yet at all. He's a bit of an odd one in that he farms real quick. Like, he can get to jungle clear done full clear done about 2:30. Like, it is damn fast. And you know, he runs Ultimate Hunter, hits level 6, just ults everywhere, gets Zhonya's real fast, runs Commencing Stopwatch. So gets to items, gets to ultimate really fast, and just looks to ult bot. He's also got some buffs, which means he can be flexed around. He got quite decent clear with the Harvest versus minions at this point as well. So there's been a little bit of top lane Fiddlesticks, I believe. Am I right, Nymaera?
Some people have been playing it. I haven't really seen it in any scrims yet, but it's kind of around. Also worth noting,
has been
and Axis drew one ban of it as well. So against either so it's been banned 3 times, 2 times versus Rascal Jester, 1 time versus Axis. I think it's worth considering it as an option, again, just because it's weird and it's different. Particularly against the Jesters and Axes, they tend to be the guys that shows new tech. So stuff like the Jinx Lysandra, they showed that in 1 week. It didn't really stick around after that. Maybe it is just that one kind of like the blunderbuss, you kind of fire it once and you're like, okay, this isn't going to be used again now.
Fear is really strong, though. The fear is really strong, and it's another kind of pseudo carry from the jungle, right? That ult is so powerful.
But the thing is, though, like, if you have one of these games where, like, you pull out just a weird comp which wins you this one game as an upset, that can really affect standings. We saw that last split.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Jasper's made a career out of it.
I mean, I think what's really good to know is that a lot of people that are finding success on Fiddle in solo queue are playing Predator Fiddlesticks. Because then you just get to proc your Predator and deja vu around the map as if it was never this day before. Higher! And, I mean, it's what works. I've been seeing some great montage plays of Fiddle Predator just literally dominating solo queue in high elo. So it's definitely good. And it's interesting that, obviously, specifically Hatchamecha, our resident weird jungler who loves to play the non-typical...
Check out his videos. He does some weird things, man.
Lots of YouTube content.
Great YouTube content. It's the kind of thing that's also good if you are an aspiring jungler. You look at the clear time, and this is the expected clear time that he does on these champions. This is what you should be aiming at. Yeah. And then if you can emulate that with some regularity in solo queue, obviously it's not always going to be the same, but it'll put you in a good place.
Yeah, I mean, like, and the thing about we talk about clear times and stuff like that. I remember watching. I think it was Tyler One's perspective of the Shadow Dogs Twitch Rivals tournament thing, which, like, normally you think, oh, okay, well, whatever, not really the same as pro level. But Tarzan was a jungler there, and as much as he's a toxic person at times, he really knows his stuff. And he knew that, like, oh, I know Rek'Sai has, like, a 3-second faster clear time than Jarvan. So I can get to top lane 3 seconds before him. If it turns into a 2v2, we kill both of them. And he says that on comms when he's doing his first clear, and they get a double kill top lane. Now, when you're talking about 3 seconds, okay, that's a really slim window of time. If you think that most junglers finish their clear, like, just after 3 minutes, and Fiddlesticks is doing it, like, halfway between 2 and 3 minutes, that's huge. Imagine what a pro jungler with pro communication could do with that. That's why Fiddlesticks is worth considering.
Down to Scuttle before it spawns, which is huge. And it's something that in Bronze Elo I don't understand.
It requires coordination.
Yeah, it does.
It's also sort of things like it's the reason why certain skill orders are sometimes chosen over others. For example, like Evelyn will always go E second when she's clearing just because you get to use it multiple times in the clear, and it takes too long for a charm to arm. That kind of thing where you save yourself 2 seconds waiting for a charm to arm is a big deal. When Fiddle gets not just 3 seconds but 30, that's
optimization is huge, and Fiddle is definitely a jungler who, in the right hands, can abuse that clear time and then potentially the advantages it offers. Now, gentlemen, are you ready to do a little bit of hot flaming? Not malicious, but we're going to give some good old critiques here, and it might come off as a little bit rude, but it's because we care. We want these improvements to happen. Or we're just going to state the obvious and it's just kind of we get to go, that's weird. First one is a good point that Nymaera was hinting to earlier. What happens if teams drop stupid games? Playoff race was tight last split. Let's have a look at Burning Core for that. And we know how close playoffs got in spring. Like, the Hawks were still in contention. If teams went 0-2, which they did, and the Hawks went 2-0, they did, and no one expected that from the Hawks because they were against DFM in one of those games, if I'm remembering that rightly. Or it was Sengoku. It was something like a really good team and an Axis. And Axis, we knew were going to beat them anyway, so...
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, and it's, what was I going to say something. I had a segue for this.
Burning Core?
No, carry on.
Okay.
I'll see it later.
I mean, like, so yeah, I brought this up on possibly just after cast or on cast, but this is a deal when things are so damn tight and it's decided by a single game. If you are drafting things like Darius because it's fun and they're not playing with it well and just inting in draft, or deciding to start fights around Raptor Pits and lose it, go for flash bindings, not build stopwatch on Morgana, and then die as a result of it, looking at you proud.
Yeah.
that had lost Burning Core 2, 3, maybe 3 games in the spring split. They weren't in playoffs. The teams are good enough right now that there is no real person I go, you're a complete walkover. Maybe Hawks. We've got a bit of a weird read.
Well, I mean, current Rascal Jester is the walk team.
Yeah,
but that's because they got huge subs in the moment in.
Yeah. So exactly. And if they get their players back, then things change around again. And like that means there are 7, maybe 8 teams in the league which are competitive.
And 6 of them get playoff spots.
Yeah, and this is the thing which I was going to say, which I forgot about. Like, I remember last podcast episode, Lexi was saying that, whoa, you know, like, we already had this tiebreaker. That's super unlikely to happen. We shouldn't get these many tiebreakers. We shouldn't. I mean, as much... It is a best-of-1 split, and, you know, when you've got, like, 6 teams in playoffs, and you only do the tiebreaker between the playoffs teams, because it doesn't matter about promo relegation at the bottom of it, there's a chance, yeah, but, like... It's very leveling when you've got these 2 teams which smash everyone, which means that you're probably going to have like 2 games taken away from you from DFM or Sengoku, for instance, right? DFM last split, they were just beating everyone.
And then Sengoku
so it does kind of
the end with V3 as well, trailing just after them.
Yeah, and then like you look at kind of the stylistic difference between the different teams. I think there aren't too many games where like I don't think there are too many matchups in general where I'm like they definitely win this, they definitely lose that. And that does mean, as Sam was saying, like, you know, like Burning Core last split, and as you read out as well, they were a team which very nearly got into playoffs. And honestly, that was being very kind to them as well. But they had a lot of stupid moments.
But then in that same respect, Burning Core could have picked up 1 more win throughout about 4 weeks, and CJ would have never made playoffs.
Yeah. Well, what about, what was it, Burning Core Rascal Jester? Those 2 games where they...
where they...
them with,
Yeah.
Yeah, they threw twice within like 2 weeks because they had both matchups there. And it was like that was when Ninja was playing Varus mid and Burning Core got off to huge leads and they lost both games. Yeah. And, you know, they win one of those games, they're in playoffs.
And that also means then Arya and crew, while Arya was our just phenomenal mid laner, it just means you can't 1v9. And that would have actually been the meme for CGA in spring. Yeah. Arya couldn't 1v9 because they didn't make playoffs. Thankfully, though, the stars aligned and CJ were allowed to get that tiebreaker match, beat Burning Core in decisive fashion, then go off and beat Rascal Jester in rather strong fashion, then lose to V3. V3 looked very, very strong at that point. They had already beaten Axis, so we were already pretty confident with them. Yeah. And then V3 lost to DFM, and that's what she wrote afterwards, after a 1 month gap, and we've already covered our thoughts on that.
We have done. But I think that the narrative which I'm kind of setting up for myself, I guess, and I've kind of infected you guys with it, is about complacency, particularly for Summer Split, because we have expectations, you know? So that means it doesn't just apply for these 6th, 7th, 8th place teams which are trying to just slip into the playoff bracket. It's for the top couple of teams where you're like, look, guys, we need you to prove something and make us not feel worried going into Worlds. Our playing stage is going to be rough. You're going to be playing against some really good teams. Complacency is not what we want from you. We need good practice from you, and that means you need to be taking every game seriously. DFM losing to Sengoku doesn't ring the alarm bells just yet, but if they lose to someone like CGA, it does.
I mean, that just really, it's what I was talking about in the last podcast episode, where I really was like, it's great. I honestly, at the end of the day, I've already given my predictions. If you're interested in my predictions, you can find it over on our Discord server or on the Ligapedia page. We will post another link on that, I think, probably in the show notes for this, because I think that'll be a good way to get people involved. Yeah. I don't actually care who goes to Worlds. I don't. I just want the team that goes to Worlds to really show what this region is capable of. Far more than anything else. If it's DFM like I predicted, great. If it's Sengoku, great. If it's V3 or CGA, great. If it's Axis, phenomenal. Honestly, if it's Axis, I'm getting
exciting.
If it's Axis, I'm getting a flag and I'm going to be waving it the whole time, and it will be behind me and everything else. But I don't think any of us are really super invested into one team going. It's because we just want the best representation of this region, and that's why Nymaera's complacency is such a core thing for us. Because if DFM are seeing this as a wake-up call against Sengoku, great. If Sengoku was going, this is great that we already can beat them, but we need to think about EU. We need to think about Korea. We've got 2 of the best Korean players potentially on our team right now. We need to prove that they are that good.
Yeah. And that's why we're so incensed about it. And we're going to keep, that's when we get a bit more real on this podcast. We're actually like, guys, if we want LJL to do well, we need a team to take it seriously. We need all the teams to take it seriously, if I'm honest, because the practice needs to be there too.
Yeah. And that's where it is. Initia1ise, do you have any other closing thoughts for this little section?
I said what I needed to, I think.
Perfect. Very good. I thought you had, sir, but I just wanted to clarify. Just wanted to do that clarification. Let's go on to our next one. Rascal Jester are in that difficult position with the subs, and this then does extend to Axis, not to the same extent, but to a point.
It's rough.
And I guess to a later point, CGA, but we'll get into the full extent. Let's just talk about Rascal Jester here and their difficulty and their place in the region at the moment.
So the major issue for me here is they are missing Vivid and Ninja, two of their absolute playmakers. That's where a lot of their plays come from. Ninja, that's kind of what I have him down of. He's not necessarily going to hard carry all the time, but he will always make the play. And that is what makes him so useful. Vivid on the Nautilus, for example, does very similar things. Pairs up super well with Art, who is their really big hard carry. Losing those two players is a massive blow. And having two players in who are complete rookies to the LJL, to professional play really in general, who probably don't need a bit of work before they're ready for the main stage. Trial by fire in a summer split where you desperately need your shot callers and you're being asked to step into those shoes, that is hard.
It is. Ninja kind of reminds me. Well, he shares some similarities with Hai, the old mid laner from T9.
Yeah.
And something which Monte Cristo loved to make the comparison of. Well, the kind of the insight on Hai was that he just knew when his team had to fight, regardless of his own personal safety. Now he'd be playing something which could dive in, like a Talon, like a Zed, and he knew, like, okay, all right, I can start a fight, I'll die for it, but that'll be fine. And his team would just win because it's the whole kind of like the macro sensibilities of, if we fight now, we are in a better position, and therefore it doesn't matter if I die, it doesn't matter, we'll just win the fight. And Ninja does exactly the same thing. And it kind of ended up chiseling to that. And he eventually ended up chiseling it to the point where he didn't die as much, and that was even better, right? But he's definitely the guy which definitely just blows the horn on all and just goes, right, we're going, this is the time to fight.
Get a solo Culinaria, why don't you?
And this break that the Jesters are currently having, sadly, due to not having Ninja there, is really obvious that Ninja is definitely their main shout caller. The main person that is saying we go or not. I think Hachimetra is their secondary one, because it's very common for a jungler to be their backup one, or just their... Maybe Ninja is their main T-fight one, and Hachimetra just does the general, oh, I'm coming here, I'm going there, or the support does it. We don't know, because we don't have that insight. I know that, sadly.
Like, in G2, I think it's like, Perks does a lot of the jungling macro kind of shot calling, whereas I'm trying to... I think it's like, is it Mickey that takes over in team fights or something like that?
Team fights, yeah. Mickey.
So, like, you have different people, different responsibilities. I don't know what kind of setup Rascal Jester have, but... obviously something has been affected, not on the same page. And what my worry is that they've lost some time to build synergy with their main roster, but when they slot back in, they might be a couple of weeks behind, maybe even a month or two behind. That's going to be really bad for them.
And that would mean they'd need to run it back real hot at the last few weeks. And that's going to be where a lot of these other teams, specifically V3, Sengoku, DFM, and CGA, are all going to probably be on full cinders, as that's what we saw come week 5, come week 6. Those teams, well, CGA till playoffs, till tiebreaker match to really turn on. But the three other teams had all engines going, and it was a damn good show when they had to face each other. So that would hurt Rascal Jester if they're having to be there, I think. But let's go on to our next little sub-diffusion, sub-topic, as it would be. And that's Burning Core. Where are we with Burning Core right now, gentlemen? Are the predictions we have said in our previous podcast going to become true? Are they going to be our 8th/7th place team?
I'm worried that you've got it right and they're going to be 8th looking at these couple of games. And it's not like they don't have anything to build off of. I think that CGA game was much better than the V3 game. Yujo did not have a fantastic debut. It was okay. It was fine. Actually, no, in some ways you can kind of say, look, okay, you know, he's against
the Lulu game was all right.
He's against 2 of our better teams from LJL Spring, so whatever, right? Once had some good stuff in the Echo game, not so good on the Kindred, and Ray Farkey had a rough game on the Maokai. Like, it's all kind of a bit all over the place. I don't have a great read on them right now, but it's not looking great.
Well, the one person we do have a read on, there was Yuhi, right? And we have made we'll call it an educated assumption And it's kind of eye-tested with it. That basically says, well, what happens if this man is removed from Aphelios? Let us test this thesis. Oh, well, look at that. He goes 0-3-3 for most of the game and eventually ends up 0-3-5. On Ezreal. Doesn't even get to the Death Dance. Like, he is that far behind in terms of just, like, he's nearly Flame Horizon by Archer by the end of the game. Like, that's when your AD carry is, like, desperately needing the farm.
I mean, that's where Proud stepped up and became the carry and ended up getting a double kill on set support. Like, that was the most tilting thing, where it was like, where I think Yuhi should have just given all the farm to Proud, and he should have just played, like, support MF from back in the day and just gone, all right, Yuhi, you're the support. I'll carry, and I'm Proud, and I'm really, really good, and I'm not on a team that's letting me perform to my level of play. But I don't know what's wrong with them. Like, I think sometimes Proud is a miracle worker, and then sometimes he's the worst player. The team just swaps around so much on what they're flippant.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether Rocky was a really big part of their shot calling. He's been around for a while.
Yeah.
The longer a player's with the team, the longer they kind of uphold. You know, they can be kind of one of those support struts for either the atmosphere or the shot calling in one way or the other.
Or both.
So bringing in, or both. And obviously we don't know that, but either way, it looked like Burning Core, particularly in the game versus V3, they just like went out like a light. Some point in the game, it's like, can't really contest the game anymore. Whoops.
Well, except for Proud, who really tried.
When
it was over. Yeah. When it was already over, though, at that point.
Yeah. And again, that game was a bit weird in the fact they burned so many summoner spells for absolutely nothing. Like, that puts you super far behind to begin with. Like, versus V3, who they know how to do one thing, it's snowball.
If anything, I wonder if the retirement of Rocky came as slightly a surprise for the team, as it feels like the team isn't quite prepared for him to have left. He's proper retired. He's not even staying as a sub for Burning Core. He's
been around for a while, so
he has.
You know, he's earned his retirement.
100%, and now he is streaming almost on a daily basis, playing League of Legends. And I've popped in, and people seem very high on him on the chat and everything. So I'm very happy, and we all wish him very well here. I'm sure. The only thing is, it's like, what does that mean for Burning Core? Oh fuck.
Yeah,
you just gotta step up.
At least they took it to CGA. You know, I appreciate that. Ray Farkey, again, he looked good on the Wukong. It's a good champion for him. Marco was his first tank played in professional play. That one looked less good.
Yeah, put him back on the. I would have preferred the Darius there.
The big problem is still Yuhi on Aphelios though. Like, he needs to get that champion, or it ain't working for that team. Yeah. And I remember towards the end of I think it was Burning Core when they beat Sengoku, was it? Yeah, because they took a game off for Sengoku, as far as I'm aware.
They did.
It was Yuhi, like, with his game-winning play with like a 4-man Graviton. Like, the guy has some really good mechanics in that champion. He just needs to transfer that somewhere else.
There's several good champions, and my concern is maybe he put a lot of time into Varus earlier on into the season. He was one of our, if I remember. God, how spring went. I believe he was one of the first players to pick up Varus in the bot lane. And then potentially he's been like, yay, I have a backup champion. He should have 4 champions. We're all aware of this. But if he's put most of his time into 2 champions, and one's an insta-ban against everybody, not just him, and the other one can get easily banned or picked away from him, and clearly Burning Core aren't going to put priority into him, because they openly let it go through to Archer.
I mean, Varus he played 2 games of in spring. Do you know what his KDA was?
I'm guessing horrendous.
0.5.
No.
He lost both games.
Bro, you cannot have a less than 1 KD. Oh my.
Okay. Well,
he went.
Okay.
That's
0-0-0 and 0-0-1.
So the only reason I think I might be wrong about my prediction of 8th place is it depends when Rascal Jester's players come back.
No, and of course, I mean, there could also just be someone like the Hawks once again just capitulating. Remember, they started spring pretty well.
Yeah,
well,
they went 3-1, and then they just put the house on fire and said, we're not going to win a game now.
There are plenty of reasons rosters can end up falling apart for various reasons. Partly it can be not adapting to changes. I mean, there'll be a patch coming in to LJL, not this week, but the week after, week 3, we'll have a new patch that might change some things. Maybe the meta's changed massively because the teams have figured out, like, for instance, Kalista's not been picked that much in the LJL. Maybe teams start playing around that some more. That's a really big surprise. Maybe that affects some AD carries and supports as well. You know, this, and one of the big things about competitive League of Legends is that there are ever changing metas, and that's one of the reasons DFM won last splits, because they came in for the finals massively prepped.
Yes.
And they just blew everyone away. One of the things about this first week is that they didn't come in as well prepped as we thought they might do. It keeps changing.
And it was a little bit all over the place from them, really. But hopefully they can figure it out. But let's use that segue of DFM into our next little topic. And this is the return of a champion which, Initia1ise, you know, the man in the mid lane knows very, very well. What happened with that Zeros? With Zeros on Seros?
Seros on Xerath.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I was trying to link the two together.
I'm gonna let Nymaera take this one because I'm not sure I agree with this point.
Okay, so when we saw DMFM have had this really long saga of trying to deal with Zoe and LeBlanc in the mid lane because Seros really doesn't like picking them. He certainly doesn't prioritize them. Whether it's the forgiven thing of him just not wanting to play them instead of the ability to play them, we're not sure. So against V3 in the semifinals, DFM decided to leave Zoe open in game 1, and they picked Xerath into it. They picked Xerath Trundle, they ganked the Zoe early, blew the flash, and then suddenly Zoe just could not lane versus that champion. So this came out again. Pyrion got Zoe, and they picked the Xerath into that. There was a super scuffed level 1 from Sengoku. They lost first blood, they lost 2 flashes, but Pyrion managed to get access to the wave at level 1, and Pyrion died 1 time that game, and he was exerting more pressure than the Xerath across the map. There was a huge couple of fights where Pyrion was massively impacting things. He reached his item break points and he outfought the Xerath pretty much at every point in the game. So for me, one of the things I was worried about going into the finals for DFM was, well, this might have worked versus Ace's Zoe, but does this Xerath with the Pantheon work against someone the caliber of Pyrion?
Yes.
And in this game, I really don't think it did. I think Pyrion had a fantastic game on Zoe, controlled that lane very well.
I 100% agree with you, Nymaera, especially on those last few points that you made. Here, like, this whole idea that DFM have been doing, and we've been calling them out basically from week 3 is when it actually became a trend, and we went back and looked, and it has been a trend for a while. Granted, last season they did have Ramune as their sub, so we can take it with
last season, not last split, unfortunately.
Yeah, last summer and spring they had Ramune as their support, as their substitute, so they could bring in that Zoe and LeBlanc and play a little bit more versatile against certain teams. This is now going to become a problem moving forward, as now even their quote counter picks has once been shown to be slightly more volatile.
It's a proof of concept that it can be.
Can I come in and disagree here now?
Sure.
Go on.
So
I hadn't finished but yeah, go for it. Go
actually, sorry, no.
You go, because I think I've got probably counterpoints to what you're about to say. So I want you to at least say it before I shut you down before you can speak, because I'm just such a way with words I have.
Yeah, so here's where I have some issues with this. So I think I actually think that DFM did not draft to play around the Zoe. I think the Xerath was kind of, it's a different matter, because I think the comp here is actually to play to side lanes, where effectively you get first blood onto the to steal on the Pantheon,
which
and you look to try and
didn't get. So they got it onto Ebby.
Sorry, they got it onto Ebby. That's right, and that's even better than because so Ebby gets first blood. He then goes into lane on Wukong, this super high priority, huge noble champion that could do crazy things in game. They then look to play around this Wukong, who ends up in lane down over 40 CS after getting first blood. That is not good enough. But then the thing is that actually Steel is attempting to play around that top lane. He's not playing around the mid lane. Pyrion managed to get access to the wave first. Then he hits level 2 first, running Unsealed Spellbook, Time Warp Atomic, runs Corrupting Potion first, has Teleport. Yep. So the point is, Seros consistently chunks out the Zoe multiple times, like 3, 4, 5 times to very low HP. Does not matter, because gets the free reset with the Teleport, has the Spellbook for the defensive summoners, has the Corrupting Pot already. So that chunking would be great if there was someone there to come and make kill pressure happen. That's not what DFM were playing around at all in game. They were looking to play around that top lane because of where the first blood turned up, and then look to use the Senna Dawning Shadow, the Xerath Rite of the Arcane, and the Pantheon it's not Grand Starfall anymore. It is Grand Starfall. So basically, just all line up in a top lane and play around that. They did not play around that mid lane. I don't think it was Seros wrong person. Pyrion super outplaying that lane, because I actually think that's exactly what the Zoe should have done in that position. I think it would have been a loss if he'd done any worse because of where he was in that lane.
Do you know what the stats are for Zoe versus Xerath, regardless of jungle matchup? Do you know what the win rate is?
I do not.
It's 55% win rate for Xerath. Need I tell you that is a high win rate? My thing is with this matchup is that like even so I agree with you saying that it does go towards side lanes. I agree because of course the Xerath ultimate is very huge, but you need to first have that ability for Xerath to roam with some impunity, and that basically wasn't happening. Pyrion was not burning summoners. He was always clearing waves, particularly in the early mid game. You know, he wasn't dropping CS. What that meant is that Xerath was not under free reign to kind of do what he wanted. The Zoe was always doing something. In fact, Zoe was getting the first roam, and what that means is that Xerath didn't get anything at all. So for me, the problem is it's not just the matchup. I think there's something about that, and you're saying, oh, they didn't play towards the Zoe. I mean, Steel did try and look at mid, just didn't end up finding anything. I think it's partly because of Zoe's wave positioning.
I think he spent way more time around the top.
Yeah, but that's because after you failed that early, Zoe ends up getting back for the first reset, ends up being safer in lane, whereas against Ace's Zoe, you know, they got the flash very early on, and then couldn't get a good reset, and then everything snowballed from there. And if you've ever laned against Xerath, I'm sure if you're listening, if you end up having a really crap early game, and Xerath get those micro advantages, it just snowballs because he can push that onto you so damn well because he has all the target accessibility and ability and range in the world.
So let's bring this a little bit back to the actual specific game at hand of this Zoe versus Xerath, and the fact that this wasn't the same performance that Xerath had on this Xerath. This was was it 02 or 03 5? I haven't got the exact.
It was 02 and 5. 02 and 5.
02 and 5. So he didn't die hugely in the game, relatively speaking.
He put out the second most damage in the game.
He farmed Xerath, Sam.
He farmed phenomenally. But the problem was, this is Sengoku who are willing to be well aware of what DFM's strategy was and not play into it, not give it to them. Because they're going to be like, well, you're going to play around the top lane then because you got this first blood. We're not going to give you that. We're not going to give you that. And they didn't. And then this Xerath became rather underwhelming. Because yes, you can get loads of poke and loads of damage and really pad out your damage to champions by chunking down a Zoe. But if you don't kill her, I'm sorry.
And if you're chunking her out, and when you're chunking out when the Zoe's going to reset anyway, it means nothing. It means nothing. It means that you've burned some mana.
You should probably be roaming.
Which is exactly why I was saying, actually, I think Pyrion did exactly what was expected of him there. Because actually, I don't think Xerath had a way to kill her right
Well, Xerath should have been doing something else then.
Well, because that's my point. The point, that's exactly it. Because DFM's plan was not to play around that Zoe, which is my point.
It starts with playing around the Zoe. It starts with shutting down the Zoe, which enables the Xerath.
Exactly. Which is why I actually have issues more with the way Steel and Ebby played this game than I do with how Xerath played it.
But then that's DF.
How much of that is how much the mid laners play the wave? Because Pyrion didn't show any opportunities to be punished.
Sure. I mean, there's something to that. I mean, that's partly why I was
ended that game. 5-1 and 50. 5-1 and 10.
And I was super impressed with Pyrion, but I also don't think it was necessarily what my issues with DFM weren't the Xerath, is what I'm getting at, I guess. My issues were the way that Ebby played the lane and top lane. Like, he did not play the Wukong well outside of the good first blood. He got that was the major egregiousness to me. It was Gang's Maokai being awful, despite having the. It was also the fact
Sam,
that
if I may just stop you here.
Really
You're talking about other points that we're going to be bringing up later.
Okay.
We're talking specifically about the Xerath, and this Xerath wasn't the same Xerath we had seen before. And in all fairness, the underlying problem is not necessarily the Xerath. Actually, maybe it's not even the Xerath. It's actually DFM and maybe Sirot's ability to play against Zoes and LeBlancs is being exacerbated now because potentially a matchup that he should have won harder didn't quite go as expected due to DFM's performance as a whole. Which I think
I'm wondering whether DFM lacked the ability to shut down a Zoe LeBlanc against mid laners of a certain level of fundamentals. I think against Ace you can get away with this. Maybe against Gallardo and Pyrion it doesn't happen so often. And sometimes that's because of the communication from Sengoku as well. They look very much on.
But what happens when that could be Faker? What happens when that could be some of the mid laners from the tier 3 mid laners of EU, which are scary as F?
Like, what happens if you're playing against like someone who drops down into 4th seed from China, and it's like, or it's like Larson from EU, or from or someone like someone like IG if someone that drops down.
Yeah.
If IG fix their problems.
Yeah. So for me, cause I guess my point to this is I think the Zoe played very, very well, and you know, a superb performance. Don't get me wrong, I very nearly put Pyrian as my mid laner of the week.
We all did.
But my issue was I think the Xerath was good actually. I think generally speaking, I had no problem. 1v1 in general. I had an issue. I had bigger issues for DFM with the way that Ebby played and Steel played, and I had a lot more praise in terms of Sengoku Gaming for how Apperman and Blank played around that top 2v2 with Pyrian roaming up to help. That was where I saw more issues than actually the Xerath Zoe 1v1, which I think Zoe played kind of how she should have with that matchup.
I think Pyrian played phenomenally. But let's actually get off, because we're quite clearly going into this, and that's interesting. It's good to have disagreements. Yep. Where, though, I am not going to agree with you unless you agree with me, and I am okay with this, is DFM's draft was fucking awful. And I'm sorry for headphone warning there, but it was one of the worst drafts I've ever seen DFM do. Not the worst draft of the LJL that week, in any stretch, but it was so poor. It was so poor, and Sengoku outdrafted them phenomenally, honestly speaking. And Xerath, if this was how it should have gone perfectly, they didn't play into their draft, which just exacerbates the problem even further. So
I think if you look at if you're looking at the full draft, so Sengoku just run over it, had Aatrox, Graves, Zoe, Ezreal, Nautilus, and DFM had Wukong, Pantheon, Xerath, Senna, Maokai. So you're looking at that draft, and I'm like, okay, where does Pantheon realistically gank? After a while, Safferman built Bramblevest Tabby. Like, it's really hard to kill top lane. So I know you're talking about, like, oh, you can definitely play to sideline stuff. Killing Afferman is quite difficult. They did manage to do it 3 times. That's actually pretty good. They managed to focus on him pretty well.
Mostly in team. So they got
he went 1 and 3 and 2 early to them. There were a lot of skirmishes around top lane.
So they got the first blood, and then they killed him.
They killed him for
first blood.
Killed him first blood.
They killed it. And then 8 minutes, and then later on, the third death was around Dragon.
No, but yeah, so there was the first blood, and then there was a skirmish around top lane as well, and then it was like, okay, so then they put a lot of effort in towards top lane. Then there was, on the third attempt, everything started going up Sengoku's way, and no one died, but they were still trying to kill Afferman. But the thing is, like, you really can't do much against an Ezreal Nautilus, because even with the Senna and the Maokai, they can poke out, but there's very little you can do there. So effectively, Steel is left with, like, mid lane to do something, and they failed to do that.
I'm sorry, their draft went all fucking wrong when they first... Red side, and this is...
You don't pick the order.
You don't pick in this order. They pick Senna... Pantheon when Graves is genuinely the highest priority in every region in the jungle, and you can blind pick him in so many spots, and they just go, nah, we're good. This is Steel. He would just destroy loads of junglers on this. Why are you not picking the free lane?
Yeah, and
then giving it for no reason. Next game. And then picking Senna as well, blind when Ezreal's up. We know Utapon on Ezreal.
So like, I will say DFM's comp in isolation
oh my god.
DFM's comp in isolation makes a lot of sense. You know, it's triple globals playing around a Wukong and Maokai engage. We just turn up and blow everyone up from massive range away. DFM played that kind of comp in spring really, really well. It makes a lot of sense. Xerath and Senna aren't the best tank killers though, generally speaking, nor are they that great.
It's not a tank
also,
killer.
they're not fantastic they're also not fantastic versus pseudo tanks in the name of triple death stance. Like,
sure, but like, you're meant to be super far ahead by that point, because
exactly.
Like, as soon as you get your ultimates, Pantheon W someone. Xerath has well, you know, you've either got the Xerath is in range for E, so he elongates the CC, or like he just uses his ult. Senna does the same thing, and someone takes a lot of damage. Problem was, Xerath just did not reach his item break points early enough, because like we said, he was not finding the edges in lane, which they potentially could have found. And bot lane was just completely non-interactive. It was just non-interactive.
Well, no,
so
it was just Yutori Moashi just killing gang over and over again, getting punished for farming.
That ended up being a lot more in team fights as well. Like, in the team fights, like, gang would just kind of go forwards, like, oh, I'm dead.
So we also say we saw when DFM pulled the trigger and thought, fantastic, tried to get on tap, and it took them 10 seconds too long to kill him. At which point, despite Zeros having burned his ultimate, despite the Dawning Shadow having come through, there's a lot of low health members that Blank and Pyrion can turn up and get some kills and turns around on, which means the snowball is muted just because of that kind of the issue being not that the comp from DFM doesn't make sense, but more that actually into Sengoku's
No, I'm sorry.
comp,
I have to disagree
it was hard
with you.
It was hard to snowball onto.
But it's I don't mind DFM's comp if they manage to crush mid lane. I don't mind that, but they just didn't do that.
No, I'm sorry. I don't.
They didn't play to mid lane.
No,
They didn't play to mid lane.
My
either.
huge problem is how they drafted. You can't red side R1 Pantheon Senna and expect your draft to go beautifully.
Yeah, when your first 3 picks are... Wait, what were
not.
their first 3 picks? Was it Ezreal, Graves, Zoe? Those are their first 3 picks.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's huge,
I think it
actually.
might have been. Yeah, it was just a lot better.
Yeah, Ezreal, Graves, Zoe, like, they are like S+ tier in their roles right now. You let them have S+ tier things for... What did they pick in? They picked in Xerath, Pantheon, Senna.
Wukong?
No, Wukong and Maokai were
Wukong
later
later,
on, I think.
Yeah, Wukong was left later.
Yeah, so I look at that draft, I'm like, wow, I get that
I think it was
DFM
Xerath third, wasn't it? It was Xerath third.
Yeah, Xerath's third because they didn't want to get it banned
and
out.
I don't have a problem with that one. That's the first time they actually do a good draft.
Yeah.
But it takes them till their third pick to actually get something. And we know that is Zeros going, I want to counter pick, and we know they will ban this. So that makes total sense. I'm not going to discredit that. And their bans were good. Their 3 bans were good.
Yeah.
They're okay. Yeah, I mean, the Varus you have to ban.
Yeah. But Syndra TF makes total sense.
It's also worth... I mean, it's also worth saying, it reminds me a little bit of, I want to say 2019 Cloud9, possibly a bit of G2 as well, where sometimes what C9 would, again, I'm trying to remember this, where they would fall into is like, they have a comp in mind. They're going to draft it no matter what, and that's what they're going to draft no matter what the other team does. And they pick up a draft. This is the composition they wanted to go for. Loads of globals, throw the massive long-range execute ults from a Xerath and a Senna on top and with the Pantheon Wukong. Hooray! But in doing that, they give up Graves, Zoe, Ezreal. Like, congratulations, you got the comp you wanted, but at what cost? And then even then, when Ebby gets first blood, and then you try to play around top lane, and frankly, he plays so poorly he's down over 40 CS in lane. What are you doing? I know Nymaera's gone, they've just been playing around mid. It's like, I understand them playing around top. But if you're going to do that, then the Wukong needs to do significantly better. I understand being down 10 CS in lane. We know where Wukong is at laning-wise. 40 plus CS is not okay.
But the thing is that, like, Wukong...
So my issue is with Ebby there.
But Wukong is not, like...
Wukong is not a Wukong.
Wukong is not a lane...
But he had a solo kill, first blood, and the rest of it. Go on. Sorry, man.
Sure,
Continue.
but Wukong is
I'm
also
passionate about that Wukong.
Yeah, Wukong is not a win lane champion.
No.
He doesn't win the game by winning lane. He wins through team fights, and he kind of sets up for other picks very well. I also think that Ebby's team fights were really suspect in this game. There was actually a point. There was a team fight around Dragon. It was the one where you thought he actually got like that 4-man ult across the team. Ebby had a chance to go onto the Ezreal. He didn't do it. He went onto the group instead, and he like killed he tried to kill. I think he killed NT for his 1 death that game, or maybe he killed Blank, something like that.
He tried to do it to Blank twice, and Blank ran him around for 20 seconds.
I think Ebby's decision making was a little bit suspect. But then again, I don't think this game was about Ebby as much as you do, Sam. I think that I agree that they did play to top lane, particularly when you talk about like the way that they both top laners at one point were like 1, 3, and 2. That like every kill was being aimed towards those 2 champions. But if you'd imagine that Pantheon going towards mid instead, and you did try and go towards mid, and I think Pyrion, largely the reason they didn't go towards mid, and the reason I love to put that point in about Zoe and Pyrion playing that matchup really well, is that Pyrion just didn't give openings to come into mid lane. You used the wave positioning really well.
I mean, my perspective is that they just lost it when they locked in the Senna. They just lost it when they locked in the Senna, because guess what? Yutapong was basically uninteractive that game, and Gang, sadly, didn't have a very good game. It wasn't like his Tom Paints game. It was arguably maybe the worst Maokai game I've seen from a Senna.
It's lane. Again, I think like this game looks really different if mid lane's just not a point of power.
Well, the other thing is, imagine if Yutapong had picked the Ezreal, right? And then they get to pick they can't pick Yuumi, or they can't pick Karma, because guess what? Sengoku know that that's not champions they can give to them. So you can pick the Ezreal, you can also pick the Nautilus, or you can pick whoever. There's multiple supports that work well with Ezreal at the moment. And then suddenly, Steel can play around top, mid, or bot lane. Senna is not a lane you can really get involved in, especially when it's against an Ezreal Nautilus lane. So basically, bot lane isn't gankable. Should play around mid more. decided to play around top. Ebby didn't have the priority in the lane, and because Ebby wants to play around the team fights, and then their whole draft just actually falls apart when you spread it out like that. In my eyes, and then it's also happened that how the game. So I mean, I'm getting results orientated thinking here. So I mean, that's not a great way to take it, but that's partly why I just think their draft was so bad.
I think there's something that we can play around, but it's not a straight up lose draft. It's not a straight up win draft either, though. It's
in favor in my eyes of Sengoku.
I agree. I mean, when you give them
a lot of power picks, they're all good picks. They're all good picks. Yeah, and then a Nautilus and an Aatrox on top for like comfort.
One of the things I'll say about Sengoku,
Apperman comfort pick helps.
Yeah. I'm not sure we're going to go back into this kind of stuff, but like Sengoku was a really good game for them. Don't get me wrong, but I need to see them win games not on Ezreal, not on Aatrox. Same kind of thing for V3. I need to see them win on not Phalios
Thresh. Yeah.
So like now it's like, okay, you've done your bare minimum. You've shown what your perfect comps are, what your comfort picks are. That's great. That's cool. That's something we can work with. Need to see that happen with other stuff now.
Well, this is why I've been calling since episode 12 or probably 11 of the podcast. We want best of 3 series because that's how you can fix that kind of problem in the league. Because if teams go, oh man, one week they played this and then another week they played this, how many comps have a team planned for? When are they trying things out? Was this maybe just a trial week of going, Yutori, can you just try out Ezreal this week just so we know where you're at with it? And then they have this performance and they go, mate, you don't have to do that good. We wanted you to play other shit, but we wanted you to try out early weeks this stuff because this is your fun stuff. Yeah. We don't know that because I was listening to the Polk State podcast where they had the SKT CEO and
Marsh, Joe
Marsh as well as
Gen
G's guy. 2 Yanks because American companies are now putting money into Korean teams, which is fucking good in my eyes, actually. Very smart business move in my eyes. Very, very smart business.
Considering the NA League is in an interesting space right now. I can see
yes, that. Comcast getting involved with T1, very interesting in my eyes. Very interesting. But they were talking about some of this and how they have so much data on teams and everything else. If no one expected Yutori Marishi's Ezreal to be like this, and then suddenly they can bring that out of a back pocket pick.
I mean, he's a legacy Ezreal player, and Ezreal's such a high pick right now. Like you
can't ignore it. And Death Dance is so damn good.
But it's kind of like if this is maybe a back pocket pick where he knows he always has this in his back pocket, and they're actually been focusing on other stuff. Makes things interesting moving forward.
You know what the pick for me was actually Utapon's Ezreal last split before Ezreal was meta when Sengoku played the Soraka. God, we know we're going to drive the AD carry, and they pull out the Ezreal Thrash out of meta, so you've got a Lantern and an Arcane Shift to get you out of danger, and they won with it. It was really good. They managed to be off the ADC really well that game.
DFM do have this weird thing, and I don't mean to insult DFM, but DFM do have a thing of trying to force to go against the meta.
But sometimes it works really, really well. So
they want to go against the grain.
Look at that Heimerdinger comp from game 1 in the finals, where like even though they lost mid lane because Pyrion played really well in the Azir and like got 2 really good shuffles onto him and stuff, like they knew how to play that comp so well. They just disappear out of vision. They'd zone out with the Phalios turrets, Heimerdinger turrets, and like.
But what happens if they could do both?
That'd be the big thing. That's the big thing. And that's why I'm like, if they ever reach their peak of their form and they have that available to them, I've got hopes for them. It's just we need to see that happen. Complacency again. Need to make sure that never happens.
Big time. Yeah. And again, so I think the consensus really is the draft from DFM was a little odd and it gave away a lot more than anything else, even if the comp itself made sense. And there were issues about how DFM played it, either not playing around mid or just failing to play around top very well.
Mm-hmm. So, we did have a point where we talk about Ebby's Wukong, but I think we've gone pretty deep into that one within the towards the trail end of the drafting section. So, unless anyone has any more points on that, we can go on to our next part.
I mean, you get first blood, you go down 40 CS in lane, you go from 1-0 to 1.
But you're not meant to win the lane as Wukong.
No, of course you're not, but you're not supposed to lose it by 40 CS.
You're also like...
Against Aatrox, you're meant to lose it.
You're also meant to like teleport in onto someone and have like huge cyclones rather than fight around top lane, which is what they continually did. Like it's like half dozen 1/6 the other, right? Where DFM probably should have tried to force on Zoe more often, but then also DFM Sengoku played really well around protecting their lanes. They genuinely did. I think that Sengoku
played that game so well.
Blank is our unanimous player of the week because he controlled the map and carried so damn well.
He just turned up everywhere.
So
everything DFM tried to do, he was there.
Hopefully, this is a kick up the arse for DFM, and it is a confidence booster for Sengoku to keep up this.
Great game.
So hopefully we see this continue throughout the split. Let's go on to something else.
And let's hope that Sengoku also don't get complacent.
Yes.
Because
that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Because that's why...
Well, they could get exposed yet. Like, what happens if the Aatrox is gone? And it turns out that Appamen doesn't have any other champions he's good at playing.
Well,
right
we
now.
know he is a man that has many champions because of Appamen things.
Some of them are suspect, but yes.
I mean, if he can just get to 35 minutes on Yorick again, we're all going to be happy about it. Come on, you all know you'll be happy about it.
I just need to not see Appamen and Nap on Ornn again. That would be great.
They're
Those two need to stay away from
They
that
have to play Ornn at some point. They have to.
I've seen them miss so many ultimates.
But we hope they're better now. We hope they're better.
Hope.
Let's talk about, though, some of the rookies and their performance on it. We're going to go by teams because some of these teams have more than one. So let's start off with the team that's having the, let's put it, suspect performance, and that would be Rascal Jester. They have 2 substitutes currently in their team, and that is Pink and Nagi as in the mid and support role respectively. What are your thoughts on these players, gentlemen?
I think that Pink had a really, really rough introduction to top side League Legends. First game against Pyrian, who is probably laning better than... Actually, he's probably laning better than even Arya right now. In lane, anyway. In terms of his CS and the pressure he's playing out.
That's actually a fair point.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm like, genuinely this week, Arya kind of snuck away with MVP with that Kassadin.
Oh, he definitely did. If his Kassadin wasn't that good, he wouldn't have got it.
It was like 2 of his Syndra game, like, well, probably go for Pyrian. But anyway, so Azir versus Rumble, yeah, it's kind of a shitty matchup, don't get me wrong, but he really didn't manage to roam anywhere. Pyrian was roaming across the map. That really sucked. And then he also lost... well, he got hammered by Dasher in another matchup too. He took 2 losing matches, but he lost really not gracefully.
I mean, it's like, especially because he came out of a fight in this game versus the Hawks 2-0 up. Like, he came out with 2 kills out of that and then managed to go down 80 CS in lane despite that. Like, I know we're saying, like, I wasn't impressed with 40 CS down for the Wukong, even in a bad matchup. 80 CS down is just not... You should never go that far down, even in a bad matchup. Like, that is horrific.
Yeah, that wasn't Ebby on his Wukong.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad, and in all fairness, I think this is a way that, like, it's not fair to go against Pyrian, and then it's like, well, then against Dasher, and it's like, well, Dasher's kind of where I would say the bench line of the mid laners in the LJL. I think Dasher is pretty much a good place to go. This is
some really good methods. Some really good methods.
Yeah. And even in the mid lane, in the top lane, he's occasionally had a pretty decent performance, especially in those early weeks when where it was a lot of solo queue. So Dasher is definitely a good benchmark for the average LJL player, and you need to be able to at least take it to him a bit. Pink is, I'm sorry to say, I don't know if they're ready. I don't know if they're quite ready yet.
Nagi on the Nautilus as well worried me a bit. Like, he got caught a lot.
Nagi was very
in lane, no less, on the Nautilus. Like, there was a few missed hooks. Like, the first game on the Karma was quiet.
But I mean, quiet is kind of good for a debut.
Yeah,
though. Exactly. It means you're not
do a lot worse.
But then against Sengoku, though, it was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean,
he went 0-for-1 and he did not protect Art that well.
There were points where, like, Blank had a really clean couple of insects onto him. Particularly, there was one where he was just like trying to walk blue side jungle, and just Blank finds him and kills him.
Yes, it was that game. I had less problems with Nagi. Blank playing really well.
Ard and Nagi were like using the Sivir Karma lane pretty well. They were pushing on the turret, keeping them down in CS. Like, it kind of stabilized that for a bit. But, you know, they had the lane pressure. It just the fights never went in their favor. Absolutely not. I'd say that Nagi had a better performance than Pink, but both of them a little bit suspect. Of course, it is hard coming into pro games from, you know, as a debut. It just is. That's a fact of life.
It is.
I'm hoping this is a crucible for them where they kind of take this and learn from it, rather than kind of capitulate and kind of stick to this kind of level of form. Because it would be nice to see some more Japanese talent in the scene as well.
And that's what we asked for. We asked for it. We are getting it. I think we were all expecting it to be more like 2021 Spring Split, where it makes more sense to do these radical changes, as some could see it. But this is what we got. Let's talk about another substitute who had a slightly better performance, but also did sadly go 0-2. 2, and that's going to be Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay. Burning Core's mid laner coming in to replace Rocky, which are big shoes to fill, as much as
Very
Rocky
big.
didn't have the best spring split. Yeah, bit difficult.
Bit difficult against Arya. He had maybe best case scenario performance on that Lulu mid.
Yeah, but the thing, I mean, like, you don't exactly lose. The thing is, like, Caston is such a power pick right now, and if you pick Caston into the correct composition, he just runs away with the game. That's exactly what Arya did, and there's not much a Lulu can do against that, so congrats, that's fine, whatever. I mean, he didn't have the best team fights, he didn't protect himself that well, but...
Didn't protect Yuhi very well either.
Yep, no, not really. Did okay with once, but yeah, it's just a hard game to impact.
Yeah. And like there was also like the play particularly versus V3 where he got dived and kind of panic pressed his summoners. Like the cocoon missed, he flash cleanses and then dies.
But he was only one off of having full kill participation for his team. So
yeah, exactly. So like there was some good moments. Like I had like there was. But some
Lulu's
good
also
moments,
a champion. That's not hard to do that, right?
Yeah, and and the Lulu was all right for a long period. Like when Burning Core were looking good in the early game, it was off Yu-Gi-Oh kind of backing up once with Proud. Like that was good stuff. But he got caught out a little bit as the game went on, particularly as the casted hunting him in a side lane was a bit sad. When they did get the turnaround, it was after Yu-Gi-Oh had the wild growth burnt by Arya down in the bot lane, and then there was the near pentakill by Arya kind of afterwards because there was no way to save people.
And against V3, Yu-Gi-Oh has some pretty good petrifying gazes, but just wasn't really. Yeah,
turned back around. Remember,
particularly that against mid lane, the mid jungled CV2 in the V3 game, the one that Sam was alluding to. Where he just like burns both summoners. No summoners were blown from the LeBlanc and Elise. Dies anyway. Like that.
I said on cast, I'm like, don't go back. He's recalling. He'll be safe. And then he goes back in and then literally dies. And I'm just, I almost have the moment where I'm like, I don't want to be a fortune teller. What? Even I know this. Don't go back.
Yeah.
And Ace actually had a very good performance and actually showed
what
he is capable of.
He paired up really well with Boogie.
Yeah, and why he deserves to be in the league. Because we've had some questions, and we will continue to watch Ace with a very close.
Well, I have to say, I mean, Boogie really wrangled these 2v2 mid lane, mid jungle 2v2. So he was really, really good. Because actually, V3 are not a mid jungle 2v2 from my eye. They kind of times. Just kind of Boogie wherever he turns up makes an impact, but particularly with that Nidalee Galio game against the Corki, it's kind of hard to break open that matchup. They did it anyway, so that gives you some hope for them. So, is it going to be enough to like take it to Sengoku DFM? Yeah, it might contest them. Do I think it's going to win in a best of 5? Not so sure about that. So we'll have to see some growth from them too for me.
And with that, we will transition over to the last substitute that also had a pretty poor showing, but probably the best out of all of the substitutes, maybe. I'm interested to get your thoughts. This is Natsume on Axis. Axis also sadly went 0-2 with a substitute on their team. Had an okay game versus CGA, had a less than okay game versus V3, but it wasn't horrendous versus V3. Other things were problems on that game, so yeah.
I mean, do you want to start? Okay, so let's go with the first game, I guess. So against CJ, Natsume picks up Renekton and has an okay game. You know, we talked about Wukong not being a win lane champion, and he kind of stayed even with Wukong.
Great flank, great teleport.
Okay, whatever, right? So maybe he didn't do much to Naps Wukong in that laning phase. But he was holding Arya accountable in a lot of team fights, and that's important. You know, if you get on top of a Syndra and make us sweat, that's your job in a team fight. Good,
especially as Renekton.
Killed the Draven a couple of times.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're playing for Axes, when you're used to having Unyan in the top lane, who can sometimes lack pressure in team fights, that's not an awful. You know, I would say that Natsume playing that Renekton probably would have done better than Unyan does on Renekton. That's not his champion. Maybe if it's on something like Aatrox, Unyan's Aatrox is pretty good, but I don't think this was a bad debut. It was somewhat quiet, but it was par for the course, so not a bad showing.
Yeah, the second game on the Ornn was a bit rough. Did barely had more gold than his support in some ways. Didn't get to finish his second completed Ornn item despite the game hitting 26.5 minutes. That's how starved out of items he was. Like,
but in fairness,
wasn't good.
There is a difference between the level of junglers, which we'll talk about in a moment, but Boogie really exploited the lack of vision that Natsume set up for himself, because you can't rely on Hoglet to be your ward bitch and everything else. You need to provide vision for yourself. He didn't at some points. Boogie knew it, and with Paz's communication most likely, and repeatedly died. And that was where Boogie picked up a lot of his kills in the early game in that top lane.
Turns out you can kill tanks before they get levels and are all that tanky and haven't built any magic resist. The 4-0 Nidalee turns up, hits a spear, jumps. He's like, well, I'm still only level 5. Never mind that.
Why is maybe the best jungler in our league? Guys. Help. Yeah, and it went really, really bad. I believe that's the game where that's where Boogie got triple buffs that game. Boogie stole.
He crushed that game so bad.
Yeah.
He didn't kill
Stole
Hoglet.
red buff, stole Raptors.
I don't think he killed Hoglet. He got the red buff, stole all of them. You made the pun about killing the Raptors, then rotating round and round again, and that was it. That's all she wrote, really. But
yes.
Let's talk about someone who actually had a very should I say good showing? Because that's a hard one, and
it depends what to judge it on.
Yeah, let's talk about Unica, who did happen to actually go 2-0 on the side of Crest Gaming Act. Having gentlemen, I really don't quite know how to put his performance, really, because it's hard to judge it. He went 3-1-7 on set in his first game against Axis, and then went 0-7-12 versus Burning Core. Let's pick this apart a little bit.
The one thing I will say about Unica, he did link up well with Arya. And when you're playing on a team with a mid laner of that caliber, we said that CJ rely on that guy before. If you're linking up with him and making him succeed, that's good. That is a gold star for that. You're performing a very good duty for your team. He was, however, behind a lot of levels, something which we know that Yoshi has suffered from when he's played on CGA, and he found it kind of awkward to path into certain ganks. Like, he wasn't as successful as some ganking junglers, but the mid 2v2 is not something I'll criticize him for.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I think he made good plays. His pathing was a bit suspect, and there was particularly versus once exploited how rookie he was. And this is the thing about coming into pro play as a jungler. Unless you're the likes of someone like MLXG or Peanut who just goes, screw it, I am the battle ward. Behold, I am now in your jungle. Come fight me, and just start run at people. It's like hyper aggro. It's like, whoa, guys. If you're just trying to play a normal jungle game, there are junglers who are a bit more aggressive, who have got a bit more experience, who have got more synergy with their team, who can really exploit new junglers. It requires a lot of synergy to play with junglers. It requires a lot of experience to know how to path and how to counter path if your initial path goes wrong, and you've got to do it really quick or you get behind really early. Once his Echo stole a great many camps away from Unica in the early game. It put him behind a lot of levels. It meant a lot of the engages he tried to pull off ended up him in dying. And that's credit partly to Once, and it's also just an element of being a new jungler, I think, sometimes.
Well, a huge problem I had was he was almost always lower in levels than his opposing jungler. Both against Hoglet and Once he was below on levels. Consistently, normally, once they hit about level 8, level 9, he was commonly at least one level below. Sometimes in the extent of against Hoglet, I believe.
Hoglet, who's down 3 very briefly. 10 to 13, I believe it was.
Yeah, but against Once, he was down about 3 levels at one point, and that's a big concern, because that's not something you see regularly in the LJL unless someone is aggressively hunted, and only Boogie and Hachimecha really aggressively hunt other junglers.
Someone being 2 levels down doesn't happen in pro, really. Being 3 levels down is absurd, actually.
Exactly. And I will give the caveat that Kindred and Echo farm really well. Set's not quite as good a farmer, but that should never be to the extent of 3 levels.
Because you're still gated even as a farm jungler by spawn time.
Exactly, by spawn time. Exactly, that's exactly it. So while the likes of while the likes of Kindred can farm really quick, that doesn't matter if you're kind of getting all your camps. And that's partly why stealing camps away was a big deal.
And the caveat for game 2 is that you're playing with a cast in mid. You're not going to have priority. Of course, you got like a prio bot lane with the Kalista Thresh, and you've got Ornn, which can get prio over Wukong. That's kind of whatever. But like the cast in mid really doesn't fight early. So once had free run on the map to
neither does Ornn. Ornn's happy to AFK farm, as is Kassadin. So basically, they're saying unless Gango and Grendel need it, they didn't, by the way. They were very comfortable and very happy to go against Yuhi and Proud. Granted, Proud was causing some problems, but again, it's a Thresh. Kalista, you're not gonna have problems. They're not gonna die unless they're not gonna fucking die unless they fuck up. So,
and I will say that Unica on versus Hogla, I mean, even though he's down levels, I mean, Hogla ended that game 0-7-7, whereas Unica died one time. So, like, at least he's not dying randomly. Sometimes Yoshi would do that in team fights.
But the goal difference between the two junglers was 500.
At the end of the game. But also that's turret gold put in as well. That's like, 3 turret difference and like plates being put into that
as
well.
Which exacerbates that, right? Which just proves how much gold that he was relying on from global objectives, from plates and everything else, whereas Hoglet wasn't getting that and yet was that close relatively in power to him.
Like, that's also when one of the first things you lose when you lose map control is jungle control, right? So one of the Crumbs' go-to color point for a great many things. What do you do when you get ahead and you take out the other turrets, but you can't really get to the turrets? Well, you go and destroy the enemy jungle. You take away everything there, and you start out, and that's where a lot of big level discrepancies come in post 24 minutes. The fact that CGA did hit a point where they were getting at that point, that's probably how he got back in levels. But the early game in both ones, he was down quite a lot. It flatters him a little bit because of what happens is you kind of lose control of your jungle. But
yeah. Well, we've recapped the rookies. We've recapped underperformers and maybe just interesting points. We've recapped unexpected drafts and everything else in Around It. We've given our players of the week, gentlemen, and we've also done our weekly roundup. I think it's about time we give a little bit of R&R to ourselves and a little bit about how we've seen it, and then we can end this podcast. Gentlemen, how are you feeling about us personally for week 1?
Yeah, sorry, I hate to bring it to you guys. I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this relationship with you two. It's no, it's been great. It's been fine. No, if anything, like doing
You're breaking up with us.
Yeah, I'm breaking up with you guys. I'm leaving for the Newell or something. You know what I'm doing. No, it's
Balance League has taken my heart.
So in the off season, we started taking things a lot more seriously. I don't know whether that's come across on broadcast or not. But we're trying to expand our repertoire, figure out what we're actually doing rather than just winging it. We have like dedicated feedback sessions, which I think they've definitely helped me. We're experimenting with roles, and coming back in the first week, it feels good to come back and see a lot of that practice come to fruit. And for me, it felt very comfortable. It felt pretty professional too. So yeah, I've been feeling good about it week 1 in.
I have definitely enjoyed it. Also getting to flex a little bit, do other things. It was something that we tried doing in practice casts, and it seemed to be working well, but seeming isn't always believing. And this was the first time we properly experimented with the idea of me not being the just dedicated MC, as it would be.
Yeah, you killed it, man. Really enjoyed casting with you.
Started casting for the LJL. I think we had done it due to outside reasons.
Scheduling,
yeah, scheduling reasons, which obviously makes sense. But part of the reason that we started doing this was due to potentially the future of scheduling, and also realizing that maybe it makes more sense for us to also just get used to doing a few other things, as esports is not just flat out you are just a color caster. Sometimes you have to do a bit of play-by-play. Sometimes you have to do a bit of hosting. Sometimes you have to do a bit, and it's I think it's good for us to also just do other things outside of just our one thing that we do, which we are also doing in the background that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
Completely. And I think for me as well, I basically just hardcore went for the play-by-play cast everyone for this week, and it was really good. I think it was nice getting back into things and seeing a lot of what we discussed and worked on actually come to fruition just internally. We worked a lot on getting Lexi and very into casting and getting him right up to speed, and it really showed off. I think he played cast really well with me. I loved our downtime. And the games themselves as well, like the prep we'd done for teams was pretty much where we were at. We were kind of on it with where we thought the meta would be. We kind of kept up with the rest of Pro League as well. what we were expecting of teams as well was good. The Sengoku was going to be close, and it was great, and it was a lot of fun, and all that kind of jazz. So yeah, prep was fantastic, and I think it's really showing off so far.
Yeah, from one host currently to another, I want to commend Nymaera on his performance as a host.
Yeah, because like in practice, I had to learn a lot. Bluntly, I was sat there like I know Lexi can just do a lot of stuff on just off the cuff. I don't have that ability.
I have that.
Yeah, I don't have that ability yet. Which I was just learning about. Okay, how am I timing segments? What should I write down? What kind of prose should I start? Well, not prose. What kind of how should I present myself? I'm still figuring that out, but it felt pretty comfortable, and I enjoyed it. Actually, it was very fun doing something different and kind of being able to be in control of the pre and post game thing was actually quite good for me. I'm just there I want to direct this conversation.
I can direct this conversation.
Yeah, this is what I want to hear right now, and that was really cool. So I'm learning to love it a bit.
And you do get that control as the host. It won't be something I'll give unless I feel that the person is worthy. So
it's very kind of you. And we'll see Sam do it eventually.
How it is.
We will see Initialize do it at some point, and you'll get a double color cast at some point. Where
that's gonna be good.
I've been brushing up on play-by-play, so we'll see how it kind of works out in the stuff. But let us know how it sounds to listen to as well.
Yes.
Love to hear those opinions.
Always happy to receive feedback, as we are doing this also to just improve our own casting, hosting, color analytics, everything about this. We also do a podcast to really help get our thoughts out there and perspectives. But gentlemen, that covers everything we wanted to cover in a pretty good bow. There was a lot for us to unpack initially, as it always does in the first episode coming back for a split. And I think we have done this rather cohesively. Coherently. Yes, that makes
bit of both.
Sense.
Bit of both.
Do want to reach out and say to Ashiki, thank you for the question, though we ended up covering it about those rookies of this week. We were very thorough with what
save that one.
You can tell it's the end of a podcast because I'm starting to lose my train of thought.
Right.
And I'm going to stream later, so that's going to be a fun one.
Lady, that should be fun.
Yes, that will be fun in and of itself. Obviously, though, this podcast is regarding our own thoughts, views, and opinions and does not represent Riot Japan, their partners, associates, nor does it also represent the LJL Officially Unofficial Cast. It is purely us putting our own thoughts out there in amongst everything. And obviously, you can find this podcast on all major stream platforms. If you happen to get here and you want to listen to it again, we do have it on audio platforms as well as on YouTube, if that's where you're happening to pick it up. Look for LJL Unofficial on YouTube. But I think that's everything, gentlemen. I will give you your closing thoughts for the podcast. If you have anything you want to touch on towards the end of this, anything about it, or if you're more than happy with everything.
I'm glad that we haven't agreed on everything. I appreciate that. Listening back to last week about particularly Lexi and I having our difference of opinions on DFM internationally, potentially. No, but it's healthy, right? It's just different.
That's why I went like this.
It's more like a different balancing of our opinions because we both see the other opinion. It's just how we weigh them against each other. And like the DFM Sengoku game this week, I'm of the opinion that Pyrion played ridiculously well. Of course, that does come into a point of DFM, whatever.
I think it's Blanket Apperman.
And I think it was the draft.
There's probably a bit of truth in all of that.
We've all probably got a bit of it.
I just hope that if we start kind of giving enough airtime to these different opinions, then you listening to this can kind of agree or disagree and get as much out of it as you can, or form your own opinions. So yeah.
Come yell at us on Twitter. Tell me I'm wrong. I live for it.
At him in the DMs. Do it.
That's it.
Do it. Come for him. But only in public Twitter, obviously.
Come on. We'll do this in public.
Oh,
I'll take you down a peg.
Fighting
it's
words.
It's gonna be great. I am currently the superior analyst.
He is actually. He's currently got that title. But
we got more predictions wrong this week than we did.
Yeah, it's true. I went for some bold ones to try and bring myself on early lead. I need to give myself the early handicap.
But 6 out of 8 still isn't a terrible performance.
No,
I was. Wait, you were 5 out of? No, you were 6. I was 7, and Nymaera was 8.
I think I was 7. I think.
Oh, you were 7. I was 6. You were 5 then.
We none of us predicted the Sengoku upset.
That's
No.
right. That's right. And where me and Initial1ise took our edge of Rascal Jester, that.
I made the assumption that CGA would drop one game just because that's who CGI are, and they just drop random games. And I kind of went for the Jesters over the Hawks, kind of not certain about where the Hawks were, and I was wrong on those ones.
Well, the first game, though, looked pretty good for the Hawks, so, pretty bad for the Hawks,
Yeah,
so it was like, well, it could be a coin flip for both of these teams. Apparently, Rascal Jester are struggling far more not having Ninja and, others as well, but I think Ninja is the big problem for them there. But anyway, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's good to be back on the horse and actually not having to force content on the podcast.
Anything is too much now.
Yes, we are back to overwhelmed with content, and we can use this as a breaking point for a 2-hour, 30-minute thing, and we can slowly start trimming out fat as it is, and where we waffle, and get back to it, especially at this end where I love to go on long, long waffles, as I do have a tendency to do. But with that all said, this has been episode 19 of the LJL Officially Unofficial podcast. We will be back next week to recap our thoughts about week 2, and I'm sure many, many more topics. But for myself, the vivacious Nymaera, and the extravagant Initial1ise, thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you very, very soon.